Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes, I understand it's a bit cold outside, but let's not have that spirit in the room. Good morning once again. Yes, my name is Chira Brian Alex YB, and today I will be taking us through the day's program. And happy to see each and every one of you. This is us starting the session. What we're going to do is to have introductions and we get started. So we're just going to move around the room. I hope we're all excited for this discussion. If anything, I think this is a discussion that has been long overdue, and it puts a smile on my face to see very many familiar faces, faces that have littered the conversation of social protection for quite a while now. So what we shall do is we shall just start off from this table and move all around the entire room, introducing ourselves briefly, tell us who you are and the entity you're representing.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elana Kembabazi. I'm with ISA, and I'm glad to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lawrence Iga, and I'm from ISA.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kabila Dennis, and I'm from Parliament of Uganda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karungi Sandra. I work with Joy for Children Uganda.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Bukenya Wycliffe is my name, and I work with the Uganda National Association of the Deaf. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Chironga Joyce, Program Officer, FIDA Uganda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kalinda Jamada Musa. I'm a final year law student at Makerere University.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm called James Owachi. I work in Cabinet Secretariat in Office of the President.
Good morning, everyone. I'm called Alan Munabi from NSSF.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Nanyondo Okelo, and I work with Akina Mama of Africa.
Morning, everyone. I'm Joshua Chisaozi, work with the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, ISA.
Nze yayirirwama nvudde ntaawo.
Nze Joyce Namasaba nvudde ntaawo.
Mukama yeebazibwe. Agnes Musoke from Mukono.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nakato Immaculate. I work with FIDA Uganda.
Good morning, Judith Muvara. I do work with Siatin Uganda. Glad to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lydia Nakato. I work with UWONET Uganda Women's Network. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Morning. Nona Tamale. I am a lecturer at the School of Law, Makerere University.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kamakone Rehema, a student.
Good morning. I'm Michael Oyat, Ministry of Gender. Thank you.
Morning. I'm Lydia Nabirio, Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Peg Joy Wako, National Female Member of Parliament representing old persons. I'm happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nakazi Florence. I work for the Economic Policy Research Center. Thank you.
Good morning, Isabella Karpovic, International Monetary Fund.
Good morning, Dr. Juma Nyende, Board Chair ISA.
I noticed some people had just come in. Could have them introduce themselves as well.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm called Zephaniah Ogen, working with the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, just to say it's, we have another table over here. I'll just give them the microphone so that.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Safina Nakulima from the Uganda Consortium on Corporate Accountability.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Atori. I work with the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I think that is it for the introductions. If anyone comes in later, we shall still do that as we go along. But for now, we're going to get into the next bit of our program. Just right outside, you'll notice that we have a certain display. And on your program, we have something called a guided tour through the Social Protection Gallery. Now, the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights has done some work around this and captured some stories that speak to the lived experiences of people that in one way or another have been left out. And that gallery is in part a representation of what that is. So we're just going to invite you at this very particular point. You step out just briefly, and then we shall be back in. So if you could just follow me outside, we shall have that tour and then get right back in. Yes, you can move. Yes, you can follow me basically. I know the scope of social protection is definitely much larger than older persons, but at least this is a snapshot of one of the areas that we thought was very critical, and as you can see the different story. This particular gallery is really focused on especially the older persons, the issue of the national ID. Mirror has always been that one cover, at least that is the story. nothing we can do about that. This is how the system is resourced itself. There's no other way we can do that. But one of the things that we're doing, and we're glad that each time there are tandem with the Ministry of Gender, rather, to see that NERA then bumps up the registration process. Alana, there is a question. There is a
community development
wouldn't be hard. Yeah.
at the sub-county and also at the they look one-sided when we don't hear the rest of the enlightenment.
I think that we said what we wanted to hear was a lived experience. Pregnancy in Uganda. Now you're absolutely right that I wish you could see some of these people. They are very happy. In fact, earlier on in the our executive director is here, Angela. She was speaking in the field. Because then it starts the discussion. Please start the discussion. Some of the older
without some effort of explanation. You're not saying anything. Contain the other side as well.
I agree, and that's why we are definitely we are reflecting.
let alone when the decision was made to roll out the program all over the country, the age, at that age, criteria was our desire was to get higher back. And our main reason was if you are going to enroll somebody based on a criteria, then you must you are persuaded. In the pilot phase, what we did bring a birth certificate, a wedding certificate, a full report, you get it. For us, we were celebrating, we were saying now we are going to not know that actually it was going to come out with challenges where some people would we are able information from NIRA involved. So basically the enrollment process gets its data from NIRA, and of course if you're using that data is analyzed, and then we go out to the field to do the verification. Now when we went out to the field, that's where we find some people who are 90, and those ones you look at them to say no, you are out. Then you find the 90 is 49. Now that is where now you have a challenge. Because already in the system. What do you do? So we now started going back and forth, negotiating with the NIRA. Meanwhile, NIRA is also saying what happens, that we have a law, which says if you are going to do the legal process. So that's the dilemma that we have. So this has happened
how are we having people from the local government, what is the dissemination plan, and I think all these will be answers given along the way. For now, we're going to continue with our program, and at this point, I noticed that our speaker who was supposed to take us to the next is grabbing a cup of tea. So yes, moving just right up, we have coming up Miss Lydia Nabirio from the Ministry of Gender, who is acting Assistant Commissioner there, who will be giving us remarks, and then we go on.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, who is unable to be here because of other engagements involving the ministry that are critical. There are many activities actually going on today, organized by the ministry, but I'm here to represent him. And I would like to welcome you to this engagement. The topic we are discussing today is very critical and dear to the Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development. We are here to launch the report that was undertaken to measure whether Uganda is ready for ratification of the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of citizens to social protection and social security. As a ministry responsible for the people, and also the lead agency in coordinating all the various actors that implement social protection interventions, we are glad that we are having this engagement where we have our key partners, our key stakeholders, as well as our beneficiaries being here to share So we hope that we'll have fruitful deliberations and share experiences through the various panel discussions and contributions from the participants in this room, who include government representatives, civil society, our development partners, the academia, and the beneficiaries. Social protection is very critical to us because we are looking at ensuring that all vulnerable persons are able to be reached, but also that everyone is able to enjoy income security and everyone is able to build a resilient life as a result of the interventions that government provides, as well as those that are provided by the private sector and other actors. So we'll be having discussions, but we hope that at the end of it we can have very good recommendations that will help be able to get a clear way forward for improvement of the social protection service delivery, but also some engagements on increased financing for social protection delivery, because that is what will build the people, and that's what is going to be able to contribute meaningfully to the national development, ensuring that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Lydia, and for pointing out most of the key issues that really undergird today's discussion. And one of the things that I would like to commend about the Ministry of Gender is that they are one of those ministries that are very keen on fostering discussions. They always have their doors open. If you would like to have anything, ask anything, do research, have an interview. And I think that is very key, that such collaborations really foster conversations that are pertinent to the citizens of Uganda. Now, moving forward quickly, we shall have Dr. Nyende Juma, who is the board chair of the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, also delivering his opening remarks. Dr. Nyende.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies, Mr. YB. Our invited guests, because I'm not so aware of who is here and who has not yet come, allow me to generally say you're welcome, our colleagues from government, colleagues from the development partners world, colleagues with whom we are working in this field of social protection, other persons invited, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, for giving me this opportunity. Much as maybe you have not done a lot to liven up the audience, I don't know whether people are busy trying to internalize, or you are so worried about the discourse that is going to take place, or you feel socially unprotected. I don't know. So I think let us liven up, because what we have for the rest of the morning will be a very, very big discussion on something that has taken center stage, as most of you already know. You are told I'm Juma Nyende, the board chair of ISA. So on behalf of ISA, allow me once again welcome you to this very important event. And I believe we shall have a lot of interaction from the members that are present. I don't know whether we've got also means of other people joining us virtually. When we talk about social protection, it is something that has been there, I think, since Genesis, or since the human race came into being. And I think social protection is not only for the human beings, but it is also very evident in the animal world. This is something that is inherent in whatever we do, and something that exists both in written and unwritten rules. We know very well social protection is very important, especially when we take it from an African perspective. We know very well our values and norms are really entrenched in social protection policies. They may not be, but they are quite very, very strong, and they tend to differ from one place to another, but generally, they are intended to ensure that we live harmoniously and we live a better life. And for those ones who may feel threatened for one reason or another, have got that chance of saying, the community is there for me, my family is there for me, my government is there for me, colleagues are there for me, and the rest of the people are there for me. So when we talk about social protection, we don't only talk about it from the context of already written statutes, whether internationally or nationally or at whatever level it may be. But we should also look at it from that other perspective of the unwritten rules that govern us as a community. ISA is something that I believe is well known to most of us, and I think the moment you received invitations, if you didn't know ISA, you should have taken keen interest in knowing what ISA is. Of course, we do a lot of work, and we are not only the only players in this field of social and economic rights. We've got so many players, and some already are being represented here. And we have done a lot of research, and part of that research will be discussed here today. We do a lot of advocacy, strategic litigation, community mobilization, and other forms of mobilization, but all geared towards social and economic rights. Most of you are aware, I believe, that there was a very important protocol that was adopted, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of citizens to social protection and social security. This was done way back, I think, in 1922. And I believe that most of you are aware that as a country, we are yet to have this charter ratified. And what does it mean when we have the charter ratified? For those ones who are familiar with the way the African Union relates with national governments, especially on that side of setting out and implementing frameworks, assurance that the country that has ratified any particular charter agrees to whatever is written in the charter. Many times, we have charters coming out and encompassing things that we already have in our statutes. And at times, this makes governments reluctant. At times, some governments come out to say, we already have most of the things that are mentioned in that charter. But of course, it is very important, much as you may have it already, it is very important to have a charter ratified. I believe, Madam Commissioner, that we are already in the process. We don't know how far, maybe we shall come to learn about that later. But I know we must be already in the process of having this charter ratified. About the research findings, I'm here to make opening remarks, and according to the program, we shall be attentively listening to those ones who undertook the study, those ones who participated in it, and at an appropriate time, we shall also participate. But you know very well that this particular research was undertaken in collaboration with RAISE. Thank you very much for the collaboration. And the findings will be discussed here concertedly for us to respond. The protocol on social rights is quite a very important tool in assisting us not only as government, but also as advocates. Because many of us here are coming from organizations or institutions that do a lot of research and advocacy work. So this protocol is a very, very important tool in guiding whatever we do in terms of research, in terms of advocacy, in terms of interventions, and other things that may be related to the protocol itself or the intentions for which it stands. For Uganda, I believe everyone knows very well, and as we are taken through the tour outside there, we know very well that we have got SAGE. We've got already some social protection interventions in place, and one of them is SAGE. And you are well aware that our colleagues, the senior colleagues, get direct support from government. And this is a lot appreciated. And we know there are some countries that began earlier. We know that there are some countries that are yet to come on board. There's always a start to something. So allow me commend government for having taken up that very, very big stride by providing direct support to our senior colleagues. That said, we know very well that what is being given needs to be stepped up, because we are getting, we are still using that rate which was fixed in, I think, 2013, and of 25,000 shillings at that time. Once translated, given the inflation and so on, and the increase of prices and so on, you see to it that it is no longer the 25,000 that it was at that time when the policy began, when they began with the piloting phase. It is now covering the entire country. So we join other people that are calling upon government to find ways of having not only the amount of money increased, but also the coverage increased, and not only the coverage, but also the way through which the entire process is done. As you saw outside there, one of the ladies is not able, much as she qualifies, she was not able to access this fund because she was lacking a national ID. So we should be having mechanisms through which such cases can be handled. Allow me conclude by re-emphasizing the following points. As we speak about social protection, what do we see as the most important things? There must be appropriate preparation. As we do whatever we are supposed to be doing in the area of social protection, there must be a lot of preparation. And research is part of preparation. And I believe as we make as we present our findings here, there are some interesting figures that may come out that will assist us in our journeys towards advocating or implementing social protection policies. Of course, the other thing is to do mobilization that goes hand in hand with advocacy. Mobilization, not only in the sense of mobilizing funds, but also mobilizing people and mobilizing the duty bearers. Because the duty bearers are the people that must be sensitized first. They must understand and internalize social protection requirements and the policies or frameworks in order to be able to implement social protection policies and other instruments. Of course, benchmarking, and a lot of benchmarking is being done. You heard, or as you'll be told, our neighboring countries have got policies, but also we can benchmark from within. We don't have to be to benchmark from outside. We can benchmark from within. We've got traditions. We've got social structures through which we can learn a lot when it comes to offering social protection. And of course, we also join others in calling for the mainstreaming of social protection policies. We know that some already are on board, and a very good example, you had someone introduce herself as a representative of the elderly. I think that is something that points in that direction of having mainstreaming social protection matters or advocates in areas like in legislative assembly and other areas that matter, or organs that matter. And lastly, this one also touches on something that I mentioned earlier, reviews. It's not all about having a social protection policy in place, but things change. So we must consistently continue reviewing these policies. I feel if we started in 2013, if SARG started in 2013, there could have been already some reviews, but how far have we gone to implement the recommendations from the reviews? It's 10 years down the road, and it's very important that we don't only review, but I also have whatever is coming out from the reviews implemented. So I know it is not our day as ISA, but we felt that we had to set the ball rolling. And once again, we are happy that the room is full. We are above 90% our expectations in terms of participation. So I think we are going to be having a very thrilling and fruitful deliberations. I thank you very much, and I request you to join me in thanking whoever came up with this idea of having this launch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyende, and also for pointing out that we still need the energy levels in the room to pick up. I would like to think that it was the sugars that were low, but I also like the fact that people have now stepped up and gotten a bite, so I hope that won't be any issue as we go forward. And one of the things that I like in conversation, we need to be alive to the needs and to the lived experiences. And how we capture this is through constantly engaging in research that is very participatory at that, but also research that keeps evolving, because as he said, the needs of the people do evolve. So through conducting evidence-based research, we should be able to meet those needs in a more context-specific way. Now, that said, we are going to move on to yet another segment, a segment where we are able to hear, and I know that Dr. Nyende in his remarks also touched a little bit on the journey that we've had for the social protection in Uganda. But more particularly, we're going to hear from one of the policymakers, someone who has been very passionate. If you followed the discussion, you'll know that she's been very passionate about the issue of social protection, and most importantly for the elderly. But this is an area that she generally has an interest in, but also speaks very vocally about. And about this time, allow me to introduce our next speaker, who is the Honorable Joy Peggy Wako, who is a member of parliament, and she will be taking us through Uganda's social protection journey. Join me as we welcome her. Please do clap for her. Yes, Honorable.
Thank you, moderator, for giving me this opportunity. And I'm really highly impressed for ISA to have invited me to participate in such a dialogue. Once again, I'm Peg Joy Wako. I'm a national female member of parliament representing old persons. I'm a true product of social protection because had it not been social protection, I'm sure when this constituency of old persons was introduced in parliament, they would have just chosen men and forgotten women. But because of the pressure and of understanding and of the awareness which have been created by social protection, I was also able to participate. And now I'm there representing old persons in parliament at my age. Now, this term, social protection, I think is new in our life cycle and is new maybe even in the vocabulary we use. Because when I was young, I was working as a community development officer in some of our rural districts. We used to have women's programs, and I was in charge of those women's programs. We used to have youth. Then we used to have other general programs. Then in the 1980, the government introduced a new term, the word gender. This gender, by the way, many of you might not have been born by then. This gender was not there before. So when the term gender was introduced, many of us were invited for workshops, for talk shows, for us to understand it. Because first day it was introduced, we thought gender meant women. But through trainings, we realized that it meant both men and women and their roles. So I'm giving that as an example that before we never had the word gender, but now it is common knowledge, even the ministry is now called gender. Yet before it was called culture and community development. Social protection journey in relation to special interest groups. According to our culture, I remember when I was still a young kid, there are some of these groups of special interest groups which were neglected. For example, if in the family they had a kid who was disabled, the family would prefer educating others and leaving that disabled kid at home. And to make matters worse, in many families and in many cultures, parents preferred to educate their sons and leave the girls at home to do the house chorus, at the same time prepare them for marriage and to bring some income like cows and what, which would educate the boy child. But those are the old days. Actually, even in my own family, my own grandfather, who was a teacher at that time, he was teaching at Muir College. He had several children, my mother inclusive. My mother was the firstborn. He educated all other children. Even my mother was educated and she became a headmistress of Kebamba at one time. But then there was a daughter, one of my aunts, who had got disabled at an early age. She got a hump. They were playing. She fell down, and as a result, she developed a hump. So when they were educating these other children, that girl was left at home to look after other young kids. You can see what the discrimination was at that time. But I'm glad, as we talk now, the policies of government Whatever we are doing now, we are all aware, everybody is aware about social protection. That's why we have several programs which are geared at uplifting the lifestyles of these people. For example, in the Ministry of Gender, we have program targeting disabled people. They even have a grant, special grant to cater for the disabled people. We have programs for women. WEPU, women are assisted to have wealth creation. We have programs for youth. And most importantly now, the elderly have come in. It was not easy because according to our culture, we were thought of that once one grows, you have to wait for the day of your death because you had become useless. You are old. If you were working in the government, you have now retired. If you were not, you are just there at home, depending on your children or your grandchildren. But I'm very happy to say that now our government has realized the importance of our old people and has introduced several programs. Some of these programs is like SAGE. SAGE, when it was introduced, in sometime in the early 2020 something there, they were targeting old people from 60 years onwards. And by then they started with few districts. It was a pilot project. Every financial year, they were bringing in 5 districts. Maybe some of you might not be understanding what SAGE is. SAGE is this little money. Sorry to say it is only 25,000, but it is very useful, being given to our old people. But when we came in the system, we realized that they were giving only a few groups, 5 districts per financial year. By the time they would have finished the whole country, maybe some of us would no longer be talking. So we requested the government to involve everybody. So the government decided, they agreed. They decided to roll out the program of SAGE to cover everybody in the country. And when they did that, the technical people, when they were working it out, they realized that the money they had wouldn't cover everybody. Because 25,000 to be given to everybody in Uganda at 60 years, there were so many people. So they came out with a system that let them at least assist those from 80 years and above. Maybe they can cover more people. They did that of covering the whole country, but giving money to only those who are 80 and above. But you know government things. They couldn't just go to the village or anywhere and say whoever is 80, come and get money. No. There had to be a system. And one of the things they had to follow was that you must have an ID. Indangamuntu. So unfortunately, most of our old people, when this exercise of getting Indangamuntu was introduced, many of our old people never took it seriously. I remember in my own village, the old people were saying, now why do I need Indangamuntu for? Where am I going to go? I'm just here. I'm already old. I don't need it. And they never registered. And those who registered, who went there for registration, they were not serious. They never followed it up. They never gave the right age. They never gave the right information. And the people who were doing that exercise were these young, fresh graduates from universities. With them, when the old person could say, you write there anything, she could see a person is an old person, but he could tell her, she could just write any age as she pleases. With them, their interest was to do more work than caring for these people they were registering. So that one has caused us a problem. Right now, as I talk, we are having so many people who are 80 years and above who are supposed to benefit from this program of SAGE, but they are not getting anything. Why? Because they don't have IDs. In fact, what hurts me most, even when it is paying day, some of these people walk to the paying station. They just stand there and they tell them, sorry, you cannot get this money because your ID says so and so. We are also not seated. We have tried to work with NIRA, and NIRA has been very cooperative about this issue. Now, what they have decided to do, they have advised us that each time now they are going to pay, these people should be mobilized. We should contact a magistrate of that area. And if there is anything else of a paper over somebody you grew with who is getting this money, should also come as a witness, so that when they are on that paying station, this person can be registered there and then. This is the information you need to carry over, because many people don't know it. They keep complaining they are missing out, they are missing out. Yes, they are missing out. They cannot get this money unless they are properly registered. It is my hope that soon as we are going to have the census, and next they are going also to start registering again for fresh IDs, this anomaly will be corrected and everybody will put in the right age. Those who cannot remember their real ages, they can always be helped by the people who will be around. I'm sure the ministries, most likely the Ministry of Gender, they are doing something about it to sensitize the people that everybody should benefit from this man of SAGE, whoever is 80 years and above. However, we as policymakers, we are not seated. When we saw some of our people are not benefiting from that program of SAGE, we went to our president. We requested him to do something for this other group, 60 to 79. The president at first gave us 10 billion. He had given us that money in 2016 when we were in Padere. But because, you know, the president directs, then there must be people to follow up. Because we had nobody in parliament, that money was never followed up until 2022, when we came to parliament. It is when we pressed, and this money now was included in the government budget. Unfortunately, the president had given us 10 billion, but when they were giving us during the last financial year, they gave us only 5 billion. But good enough, it has now been included in the government system. This money will be coming every year. So now what the Ministry of Gender did, they formed another program which they call SEGOP. SEGOP is Special Enterprise Grant to assist old persons from the age of 60 to 79. These old persons are advised to form themselves in groups of old persons, only those who are 60 to 79. We told them to form themselves at least in groups of 10, and each group is given 5 million, and then the members stand as security for each other. They must be members from the same locality so that they will know if somebody misuses that money or doesn't do well, then they will be responsible. This one is now working. Many groups so far have been covered in the whole country, and I think everybody is happy about it. But what lacks, people don't understand what is SAGE and what is SEGOP, because I saw this from our own parliament. Our own members of parliament, at first they didn't understand it. They were saying, but these old people already have SAGE. Now SEGOP what for? That is a duplication of programs. But we have tried to explain to them through workshops, social protection. We have in parliament, we have a social protection forum. They have assisted us. They have organized workshops for MPs. Ministry of Gender is also doing the same. We are trying to create awareness so that our own people understand the difference between these two programs. However, this money, as I have told you, is little. It's not enough. It cannot cover everybody as we would have wished. But when the government started the program of parish development model, then we said, now let's use this chance also. You remember the first workout, they had left out the old persons. They had said on the committee, there should be there an opinion leader. With us, we went back and said, no, we don't need an opinion leader. We need an old person to the level of chairperson in that parish to represent us in that committee, on that committee in the parish. Now, you are aware that with the parish development model, every parish receives 100 million in every year, every financial year. And out of that 100 million, we as old people and the disabled, each of us is given 10%. 10%, that is something like 10 million. So, every year, if every parish can receive 10 million, and at least they serve 10 people, those who can afford to take the whole million, they can take one. Those who cannot afford, they can take less. But at least we want in every year serve 10 people. They use it for 2 years. After 2 years, they will return it, and other people also take it. So I think there we shall have helped our elderly to help themselves, because we don't want them to keep begging. We don't want them to die regretting. Another problem which affects our old people mostly, because of age, is the illnesses. They suffer from all sorts of diseases, as you see them. I think some of you see them. Some of them are your grandparents. Some of them are your own parents. Now, we also requested the president, because at that time, the government has a program of health center 3s and 4s, almost in every sub-county. But what was happening, when they are packing drugs, sent to these sub-counties, they could pack drugs for children, drugs for pregnant mothers, and other few drugs. For old persons, Those were never included. When we asked why drugs for old persons are not included, they said those drugs are expensive. So we went again to the president. He directed that whenever they are packing drugs, they should make sure drugs for old persons are also included. And now they changed the system. They no longer pack them from Entebbe as they used to do before. It is now the district medical officer to request. So these DMOs also, whenever they could be requesting, they could request for other drugs, of course, put more funds on their monitoring and what, and leave out old persons. But now it is a directive. All drugs going to any health center or any health unit must include drugs for old persons. If they can follow, and it is done well, I think our old people at least will get a relief because, is it time? Okay, I'll try. So at least there, our old people would be getting some drugs, be assisted. Now, when we have such a protocols, like this one of ISA, concerning social protection, if you can all go back and advocate for your organizations and advocate from where you are, sensitize everybody, because even as we talk today, some people still feel that old people or these disabled people, they don't matter. But let's try to advocate, try to raise awareness. I think in the near future, maybe everybody will be aware and we shall be on the same level. Actually, I'm very much impressed to see that in this very workshop where you have invited me, you have invited those two old ladies. I'm really very, very happy. Thank you so much for involving them, because they are the people we are planning for. With those few words, let me stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Honorable. And I know she could have talked for the entire day because, again, this is a subject that she's very passionate about and she's been in for a while now. So thank you for highlighting the different perspectives that undergird social protection, from the old persons to other initiatives such as the SEGOP, but also the parish development model. Thank you very much. And as you're summing up, mentioning the older persons that we have in the room, because then what we're going to do next is to just hear from them. We think it is very important that we hear these voices firsthand. Many times the lived experiences of people are not meeting the ears of those that need to be advocating for them. So I think them being in this space is very important, and we are going to have a discussion, short discussion of them sharing their stories, especially about the SAGE program. And I think we shall do it from there, where they are seated. We shall just do that. Hello? Yes, so what we're going to do is we shall have them reintroduce themselves, and then we shall carry on. I'll ask them a few questions, but let's have them reintroduce themselves. I know that they're here with someone that helped them get here, so maybe you can start.
Mukama yeebazibwe. Amannya gange bampita Agnes Musoke oba Nakazibwe Agnes. Ono omukyala ye Namasaaba Joyce. Ono mama wange yayeri Lubwama. Tuviiridde mukono ntaawo.
Mpoze ekibuuzo kyennyina omama alina emyaka emeka? And so she says she's 93 years old. And then mama olina emyaka emeka? Chinana mwena. 84, she's 84 years old. Ono mwana muto eh? So katujja tandikira ku mwana omuto. Mama, ofuna sente z'abakadde? Do you access sage money? Ofuna sente z'abakadde? Mufuna ntono nnyo?
Emyaka ndi mu 93. 83. Naye tufuna ntono nnyo okusinziira ku byetaago by'awaka. Ate nga tuzifuna buli myezi 3.
Okay, so Mama here says she's 84 years old. And again, from what she's saying and how she's delivering the story, you understand that these are some of the challenges, especially for older persons, and why we need to be very intentional when we have them being included in interventions. Now, for her, in just a space of about a minute, you could tell that she has mentioned she's 84 at some point, 83 at the other point, 93 at some other point. But what we know is that she is definitely above 80 years of age. So when I asked her if she receives sage money, she actually does, right? She does receive the money, but she said that it is very little. It is very little, that it doesn't meet her daily expenses. It is not enough. So maybe now I will speak to the other Jaja to also just tell us if she has, if she receives sage money or not. Jaja. Is it working? No, I don't think it's working. Jaja twagala mmanya. Ofuna sente z'abakadde?
Wange?
Ofuna sente z'abakadde?
Sifunangako.
Tofunangako? Lwaki bakugamba lwaki?
Simanyi. Omukulu akulira okwaffe bwe bagenda sibambuulira. Siwaba awambuulira.
Omukulu wa LC?
Akulira abakadde b'entaawo. B'entaawo. Bagenda sitegedde. Kale nakati kwe kufuna omwana oyo ne mwegayira, oyinza okuntwalayo oba oliawo ne nfunayo ng'abakadde.
Omwana ki?
Oli
ono Joshua?
Bwe mwegayiridde nti ntwalayo nange nfuneyo ku bakadde. Omukulu kyegwe abo be balagirira, kale be balabirira, nze sibampa.
Naye ng'olina ndagamuntu?
Wuuno.
Waali awo? Amuggyayo ndagamuntu tumulabeko. Yes, but what she's saying in brief is she has a national ID, and I see she was born in 1934. 1934. So surely she is over and above 80. And I love the fact that we have, yes, she's exactly 90. That we have Honorable Wako here today, Because one of the things that have helped us is seeing that such people are in the room and are able to pick up these issues and help elder persons such as Mama here. So she says that in her situation, although she has the national ID, she has never gotten SAGE money. And if anything, every single time she hears that there is distribution happening, she has never been taken to the place. The person who is in charge locally, that is, she calls that the chairman of the older persons, has never taken her there. And so she doesn't know what to do at this point. And today when she heard about this, when Joshua approached her, she said, please do take me to that discussion. And from what she's saying, you would clearly understand that in coming for this discussion, she believes that there can be hope found in being part of this space. So these are some of the stories, but also maybe I would love to know from her and some of her closest companions, if there are those that are actually getting. Mama, mbadde njagala kubuuza kati ku banno ku mikwano gyo kuliko abafuna ssente ezo?
Kuliko abafuna ku ntaawo okwo kuliko abafuna naye nejjuukiriza bafunye.
Wejjuukiriza bafunye? Kati bo tebakuwabulangako okukyakkola? Bakugamba ki? Tebalina kye bakugamba? Nabo baalabira awo nga babayisa? Bo babayita.
Naye nze sigenda sifuna. Kwe kwegayirira omwana oyo nange ntwalaayo eyo nfuneyo. Aŋŋambye nti jangu tugende tulabe.
Ewaka obeera bw'omu oba olinawo ko gw'obeera naye?
Ninawo abazzukulu 3 mbenni nabo abankuuma awaka awo naye sirinayo mubunaanyizibwa mu bantu bange be nazaaliwa naye gwe nali nsigaza yafa nasigala obw'omu. Sirina muganda wange, sirina mwannyinaze, ndi awo.
Kati
abazzukulu benzaala eri si wano ku luggya lwe nazaalirwako lwa kitange. Kwegamba ndi ku luggya lwa kitange kwe nadda kwendi, naye mwannyinaze gwe nazaalibwa naye yaŋŋendako kati ndi awo.
Kati abazzukulu balinga mu myaka emeka abobeera nabo?
Omulala yakamala siniya ey'okuna. Omulala yali omwana yaali awo bakolaakola awo bwe bakola baalemebwa nga sibalina kusomesebwa. Kwegamba nabo tebalina kitaabwe, tebalina mwana gwenzaala, bali awo.
Yes. So from what she's saying, and I think she brings out a very interesting scenario, because one, she stays with some of her grandchildren. She stays with some of her grandchildren, and I think one of the eldest is now, has just finished senior 4. But what she highlights is also that in this discussion, as you can clearly see, that here is an older person that doesn't have any help, but then she's staying with some other individuals, and she highlights that even for them, getting an education has been very difficult. So I think you see when we talk about the entire cycle and how social protection is really core, you can see how that is important. And maybe I'll still also just ask Jajja here. Jajja, ngawe mbadde mbuuza munno, kati gwe wuwo obeera bw'omu oba olina b'obeera nabo abakuyambako awo?
Nawo abazzukulu bakusoma bali awo, emirimu banoonya minoonyi ne babeera awo.
Yes, so the story is pretty much the same, because even for her, she's staying with some of her grandchildren, but they also do not have much to do. They're not employed, and they're trying to get to earn a living, basically. So you can see that again, the issue of, and I like that some of the previous speakers had also talked about the fact that this money, this monthly stipend looks like a little, but it actually would go a long way in alleviating the situations of older persons such as these two mamas. Jajja, waliwo ekirala ky'obadde oyogerako gw'ogambye sente z'ozifuna naye ntono nnyo. Akabanga zitwala kabanga kenkanawo okujja.
Anti emyezi esatu.
Myezi esatu.
Naye nga tufuna esente ntono nnyo singa emitwalo esatu tezirina kye zigula.
W'obeera okugenda ku kifo kye bagabiramu ssente, otambulawo, okwatawo booda, okwatawo taxi, otuukawo otya?
Era nze mu myaka egyange ntambuza booda. Sikyasobola mpigere. Etwalawo emitwalo esatu. Emitwalo esatu.
Booda ekutwalirawo ssente mmeka?
Sente yezeetwala.
Okutuuka we bagabira ssente.
Emitwalo ebiri egimala.
Jajja tontegedde oba? Nze abadde abuuza. Okutuuka we basa.
Anti egyo emitwalo esatu.
Yes. Is she? Pensioner. Jajja wakolako ne gavumenti.
Nze sisomangako olwasomezebwanga nkuze nembivwako sisomangako. Laba na luno oluzungu pozi okujjako nga mu Bayibuli Oluganda nsomako.
Otegeera.
Naye
bino nange mbirabira wano okitegeera.
Sirina kyenkolako.
Yeah, so she's never had an education, she's never worked for any public entity. So pension, she wouldn't be getting that. Akwata nkumbi. Kujina emyaka achagikuba. Akole chi. Yeah. So the other interesting bit is that she's actually still working, so she still tills the land. And you can imagine at this age, and she's doing that because she really has no option. Because if you sit back and you don't till the land, then how are you going to survive? So it's very important. But there's something that I was trying to also get from Jaja here, that kyabadde tategeera. Mbadde njagala mmanya mpozi obadde omuyambako okukyansaringa nti ssente akozesa mmeka okuva ewaka ewuwe okugenda ku point gye bagabirako ssente ku booda.
Ezo sente zenkugambye emitwalo esatu. Omusajja omwega yawegayiza okusalirako naye abagambye emitwalo esatu okuva entaawo. Bw'aba yagadde okuntwala etwala emitwalo ebiri n'ekitundu oba esatu.
15 kugenda n'okkomawo 5. Okay, and maybe here the point is because I was trying to ask her the transportation costs that she incurs when she's leaving her place to the distribution point, how much that is, so that we also get a context of when she talks about how little the money can be. So it also means that going to the point itself, let's say, and I'm just trying to rely on what they're saying, that you'll use a border of about 5,000 going and then coming back. So if you're getting 25,000 shillings, so they see an elderly person and nja kutwala. So those are the dynamics, yeah. But if we were to look at it from the perspective of even if it was that no one was taking advantage of her and she had to spend about 10,000 to just go and get back, that means from 25,000 she would be left with how much? 15,000, right? So that is what she would have to live off in all that time. So bajjajja mwebale nnyo kunyumyamuko naffe. Jjajja asese kamwenyumwenyu keeko. Mwebale nnyo tubeebaza nnyo. Kale. So thank you for those stories. We're going to move forward, but we thought it was really important that we have a discussion so that you get a first-hand idea of what exactly happens, at least in that particular setting of SEDGE, for example. All right, so the next phase is really going to be us getting into we're going to get into the session where we listen from those that conducted this research and get to know what is it that they found out in their research. But also, as we do that, you'll notice from your program that thereafter we shall be having a panel discussion. And as the presenter of the research and its findings is coming up, we would love also, in the same breath, to invite the panelists so that as she's presenting, you're already set and you'll only be starting the moment we finish that presentation. So allow me to introduce our panelists. One, and as I introduce, kindly take up your seat. I'll introduce Miss Isabella Karpovich from the International Monetary Fund. Let us clap for her. She takes her seat. And as she gets up, shall we also have Miss Lydia Navirio from the Ministry of Gender. She's an acting assistant commissioner at the Ministry of Gender, Miss Lydia. Clap for Lydia, she takes her seat as well. And I see one of our panelists has also just gotten in, so before she sits down, Miss Nona C. Tamale from Makerere University. May you also take your seat as a panelist. And then lastly, we shall have Miss Florence Nakazi, who is a senior research fellow at the Economic Research Policy Center, EPRC. We are happy to have you as well. Clap for her, please. Yes, and with that done, I will invite Ms. Alana Kembabazi, who is a manager at the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, to take us through the research and its key findings. You're welcome, Alana.
Good morning. I hope the energy is a bit more up now. I think it is. I mean, listening to these, to our senior citizens was very interesting. And I've loved that we've already, I feel like we started the discussion before we started, because when we went out for the photo exhibition, then we were already seeing what, you know, people already having very heated debates that I hope we can continue to have. I want to underscore that social protection is not, well, we focused a lot on older persons because that's Uganda's flagship program. If you look at, we don't have a copy of our report cover and you'll be seeing it. I think the team has a beautiful launch all set up. But we use an umbrella because when it rains, you need an umbrella. And social protection is essentially that. You will need it at some point in life. So it should go across the life cycle. And I'm very excited to be talking about the African, the protocol by the African Union, the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the right to social protection and social security. And I will say that while we had started social protection as already as Uganda, African states gathered, and one of the key takeaways they had, especially from the pandemic, I remember attending a meeting in Senegal, where the African Commission had convened all these African states, was social protection must be prioritized. So they began to say, what do our people need? And it was passed in 2022. If you could just go back to the first slide. And social protection came up a lot. Uganda was reviewed in October, November last year. I'm glad to see some of the government officials who are there. And when they were reviewing its human rights record, when they were reviewing its development record, social protection came out as a key issue. And Uganda said it would begin to look into this process of ratifying the protocol, of course, a relatively new protocol. And I'm glad to see Ministry of Gender and others have begun to start to think about what this could look like. For ISA, we thought that it's very important. You know, if you're doing something and no one is assessing you, your 30%, you will be the best. If you're the only one in the class, if there is no marking guide, you are always the best. So we want you to have a marking guide in terms of what are we doing, what are some of the gaps, can we reflect and have discourse? If we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to briefly talk a bit about, first of all, the expectation is you're supposed to have life cycle social protection from when you're a baby, life's first cry to final breath. There should be social protection provided to those who need it, because you may not necessarily need it at all of you, but it should be there tackling all these areas. And that it's also a right. And so it must be available and accessible and adequate, affordable, transparent. And there must be regulation, including of all players, that cannot provide social protection. And if you look at your tables, there should be little summaries, which I think we shall make more colorful, of the protocol. But I want to talk a bit about Uganda. Yes. I'll say that we've been very concerned about social protection for a while. And we monitored this throughout COVID-19. You remember some people got cash transfers, for example. We've been monitoring older persons for a while. We even filed complaints, and that's how we got to know Ministry of Gender really well in mediation, where we actually realized that we were trying to get to the same goal. And have looked at the barriers for older persons, for younger people, things that some of the older persons today have been talking about. Digital ID, we have a lot of work on that. Next. And I will add that why is this discussion important? Poverty has always been a concern, and people often think of social protection as for, say, poor people, right, or older people. And we know what the numbers and figures are, and I have some up on poverty. But when you begin to look at vulnerability, which is what we should be looking at, and Zephania somewhere is in the room from Ministry of Gender, who really loves to go on about the fact that it just takes one thing, a job loss, a medical bill, and suddenly you're there. And the statistics on vulnerability show that 1 in 2 Ugandans are vulnerable. We know that there are things that I was talking to my neighbor and I was saying, what if you lost your job? She said, I'll go to the village and dig. I said, but we have climate change. What if the harvests fail? What then happens, right? Because now we have to think about vulnerability in terms of the realities today. We've always had the poverty. We've always known that the informal sector is more vulnerable. We've always known that children, particularly with disabilities, are more vulnerable, persons with disabilities. But we're also tackling climate change as a key area that is heightening our country's vulnerability. And I'm glad the panelists here who have expertise on that, like Nona. And if you look at Uganda as a whole, if you define there's social security and there's social protection. Social protection is broader than social security. But if we look at social security, you will see that most people, 75.6, just have nothing. If you look at this table, they go rural, urban, agriculture. And this is, I think, from the National Labor Force Surveys. This is government data, right? But the majority of Ugandans don't have. And there are some that joined the company of our mama there who said, I don't know. I just know that it's not working, but I don't even know what I should be getting or anything, right? It's mostly, like we've said often, for the formal sector, if you think about social security, or if you're lucky, for older persons through Uganda's flagship SAGE program. So if you're above 80 years, you will get some money, but everyone else is not really covered. And this is why some people will say persons with disabilities, they have this grant. Some people will even say parish model. But we think of social protection as predictable support. It's not a one-off. When it's a one-off, we had, for example, cash transfers, and they can come in a bit as a one-off, right? But even then, if we had stayed, one of the arguments people made around the cash transfers was, okay, you give us one-off, and we've been locked down for a while, and if that's why they were pushing as well for the lockdown to be lifted. So it has to be predictable. And by that rubric, there is not as much. Look what the next. And so we looked at it, just keep clicking, the words will come on. We looked at it throughout the life cycle. And I don't know what, if you could click one, yes. And if you you're thinking about children, right? Like when you're really young, or for pregnant mothers, government is trying to do some things with donors. And for the children with like trying to experiment NutriCash. But right now, they technically are not government funded. I commend the Ministry of Gender for trying to recognizing the problem, but there is not yet sufficient political will across government to deal with that category. When we get to children, you will have, for example, it's even KCCA Girls Empowering Girls, but it's just here in the urban areas. It's a donor-funded thing. School-going age, you should be able to have things like child benefits, school feedings, good public education. You guys, public education is part of social protection. Good public health systems are part of social protection, as defined by the protocol. But there's some serious limitations there. The majority of children we know are not in any way covered by social protection programs that are there. There are some who get indirect benefits. If you look at the photo essay, you'll see the grandmother who is looking after her grandchildren. So I guess technically through the SAGE money, she's benefiting in some way, but they are very, very, it's not really prioritized as much. School feeding, which became a big issue. I don't know, I remember going to Karamoja in 2016 and I met kids who had not eaten at all the whole day. So when you gave them sodas, they kept to take to their family and their siblings and share at home because there was just food insecurity. And school feeding then becomes very important because how can kids learn? And and it's a thing that we are not doing. Rwanda, for example, is doing school feeding. Government has, in our research, we find that some of the challenges, for example, with school feeding are also tied to the law, which distributes the responsibility between, actually really puts the responsibility predominantly on parents, but I know that government has been exploring this conversation and we look forward to fruitful discussions there. Public education, of course, it can improve it. We know we have UPE, but how many children are able to access UPE? It's very underfunded with 20,000 capitation as the capitation grant. So there's often no sitting space and very, really challenges, poor quality of the public schools. And this is important because for children in particular, they really keep underscoring. When you're analyzing, when you're looking at the rubric, and if you look at that little handout, for children, and the full protocol is online, and in the book you'll see, we really get into it. But for children, they really underscore the importance of public education, and so investing in that. And when we get to, so you're a bit older now you're working, what is there for you? We used to have some things that were trying to think around this, but again, not very much. If you're in the formal sector, maybe you're contributing to social security like some of us are with NSSF, although again, we have, while it technically falls under social security, and even so in our policy, as a social protection program, we have serious issues with it because again, it's a one-off payment, and most of us, we know the data shows most people have used it up very quickly, and then you're there in your old age. If you're lucky enough to work for government, you will get your pension. And if you're in the informal sector, then you're really falling through the cracks, although there are some innovations around you trying to getting people to contribute through voluntary programs. And we used to have things like cash for work, limited donor dependent. We had NUSAF 3 limited access as well. And when you move to, if you have a disability, for example, if you're a vulnerable group in particular, there is no regular predictable support. And that again is our criteria on that. There are some grants, one-offs, but not predictable or regular. And for women are a group where they have certain requirements they want to see because they recognize also their vulnerability. Again, you may have certain one-offs, but not predictable. And a key part of that is maternity care. So, and having good maternity care. So again, we come back to our public hospitals. How are they doing? How are they? I want to give you that this, a lot of this, I know the Assistant Commissioner is on the panel, so she'll speak a lot more about government's efforts. But I will tell you that for our key finding was we are still yet to truly implement a life cycle approach to social protection. The policy hopes that we can, but in reality, like I said, if you follow the age and everything, you will not find that there is as much. For older persons, of course, we have SAGE, and we'll get a bit more into it because I think it's a flagship one. So the key overarching finding, one, we are doing some of these things in the absence of a very strong legal framework. SAGE, for example, we have the passion. We started giving out SAGE, and then we did the policy. And that was great. And the policy is quite comprehensive. But it's always good to have an enabling law. And we can look at our neighbor, Kenya, which does have one. And this is important because we do have some laws that touch on different things. There's even some, constitutional protection around things like pension, but you're going here, then you're going here, then you're going here. If you have something where you begin to think as a country and say, okay, what are we saying our people should have towards social protection, all in one place, in a law that enables you to be able to even make the case when you go to parliament and say, actually, we are supposed to be able to do this because technically it's here. That will go a long way, and also help Ministry of Gender, because sometimes Ministry of Gender is trying to make the case, but without the enabling legal framework, it is left to the discretion of the donors or government or what is possible. Let's go to the next. I want to get to a bit into SAGE because we have a lot of older persons here. Somehow it's a thing that everyone talks about, but also it's because we are now more than 10 years into SAGE. And so we're able to look at this more critically. Like Dr. Nyende said, the amount has not changed in over a decade. And when you look at the cost of living crisis and everything, it's about 16,500 shillings today. When I heard that the person say that they spent 30,000 to take a boda to get the money, and then there was debate, and I was like, that's the experience. It means that we're having trouble with the balancing of this, right? And we could do more to really increase the financing for older persons. According to the minimum expenditure basket calculations, we need at minimum one older person, 100,000, and this is government's sort of data looking at what you need to survive. So in a household of 5, you'd be 500,000 shillings. And also because we know that very many people are still excluded. Only 1 in 3 older persons are actually receiving SAGE. And this is as of the 2022 target that is in our National Development Plan 3. So this is government's on what is feasible as of this time. And up to now, we are 2 years past the target. We're only getting 1 in 3 older persons receiving it. And we know that they face heightened vulnerability, like they were pointing out. 2 in 3 persons are really struggling, 2 in 3 older persons. I would like to move to the next slide as well. And sometimes it's not just money. Sometimes it's things that could be fixed, and we were having that discussion outside around, for example, challenges national ID. Honorable Wako talked about how when older persons were being registered, there were certain challenges already at that point. And then because of that requirement, even when the field staff, the local government staff, or Ministry of Gender, some of this is brought to their attention, they struggle to have they struggle to be able to waive the national ID requirement. At the World Bank meetings, and this came up a lot, because Uganda's SAGE program, the UN Special Rapporteur on Poverty was talking about the non-uptake of rights, and it featured the fact that the insistence on national ID solely is hindering uptake of this program. And so one of the things we were discussing at that session, and the World Bank on our session was saying, there are certain instances where government should be able to innovate and try to get it to people. And here you see twins. One is getting, one is not getting. So it's again, we're calling upon government again to really address some of these non-financial barriers that we can sit through and think through. Next slide. I want to get to financing because everything comes to money. And we also have Miss Isabella in the room, our IMF rep, and she'll get into it. But I think that one of the things that the protocol talks about is the fact that, first of all, you're supposed to be able to have actuarial assessments to look into, like, what is the funding situation, like who can contribute, who can't, how much should we give, all of that. First of all, the planning. And then it also pushes you to progressively increase the minimum percentage you're giving every year. right? And it tells you how. It says, okay, what are the measures in which you're going to get this money? What measures are you taking to curb fraud, corruption, illicit financial flows? Like, where are you looking everywhere in your arsenal for money? Because you need to finance social protection. Again, it is a right. And also, how are you coordinating development support? Because development support for most of us African countries is there and it's a reality. And so what are some of our key findings? On coordination of development support, they are trying. A number of us sit on that social protection thematic working group. And there are also some donors there and civil society, and a lot of these issues do get discussed there. And I know there's also a donor working group on social protection. But when you look at the financing, and this figure, 0.9%, is featured in a lot of government reports. So we began going back to really track it, and we saw it was really 2019, 2020. But even when you go to other years, it has never exceeded, really. We haven't gotten to 1%. And our policy talks about the fact that we should be able to have at least 1% for basic building blocks of GDP. For two of the largest direct income support programs, we've only spent in prior years, for example, 0.14%. Again, we're looking at this over time to get a sense. And we're comparing what are our peers doing. Kenya, Rwanda, again, still falling below par. And if you look again with the countries as well, we are still we are not there yet, right? In the report gives a bit of some of the case studies in terms of how much other countries give. I think in South Africa, it's like the older person get, I think, 400,000. In Kenya, it's more than ours. So it will be interesting for you to go through and see, okay, what is feasible, but what is also feasible for someone to live in dignity, right? And of course, we talked about, for example, the Child Disability Benefit Grant. And we actually found, and government own research has been looking into this as well, that it's actually feasible to do so, that you can finance it, just getting 0.05% of your GDP. And I'm going to talk a bit about how we can get some of this money, and I hope the panelists will get us thinking further. Can we truly afford not to finance? You know, when you think about financing, you can think about the money, the cost of what you're going to do, the money you're expending. What is the other cost of not doing so? And I want us to begin to think about that very critically. And I'm glad to see Madame Beatrice coming, because I know she's working a lot on the strategy. And they get into some of the costs in terms of when you don't interact, in terms of the ways in which social protection is actually having a stabilizing effect, but also the benefits, because our own data has seen that just with SAGE, there was a 20% drop in poverty. Right? And if you just with the current 25,000, and if you went up a little bit, I think it would be 35%. But also, when we think about financing, where would the money come from in a time of fiscal consolidation? We've argued again that if you look at, for example, how much Uganda loses in illicit financial flows, you can actually finance social protection, right? If you think about the tax exemptions that are given in ways that are not sometimes even very transparent, but tax exemptions as a whole, we have to think about them and say, okay, do we really, really have to get tax exemptions? Because when you give an exemption somewhere, it's money you're foregoing that you could be using to help your people. And so those are two areas. Of course, things like corruption as well. Remember when I think, who was it? She made a very good comment, and she said that when we lose money, when we are corrupt, it's not us as government that suffer. When people are corrupt, it is you, the people. And I think we need to begin to understand and think about, and one of the things that the report is trying to do is to say, okay, from corruption, from illicit financial flows, how much are you losing that you could actually use to transform, for example, that older person's life, right? And so it's encouraging us to have a more nuanced discussion around finance, and that's the beauty of this protocol. Let's go ahead. And so what are our recommendations? Because I saw that my time was up. One, we want government to ratify and domesticate this AU protocol on the rights of citizens to social protection. We think it's very valuable. It provides a way for you to really think about this in a way that is more holistic. And again, like I said, it's by African member states sitting and thinking what is feasible. It was not imposed by anyone else. To, of course, increase the financing for social protection. We all know it is inadequate. Right from the people who are engaging on a day-to-day. And the SAGE grant, for example, is a very easy example, because you just have to look at how much they're getting and how much you spend a week. and implementing a human rights-based and life cycle approach to social protection. As long as we don't begin to really think about it as a right, always other more important pressing priorities that should be financed before it. And we sometimes forget that it is so integral for people to get these things, because then they're able to live in dignity. And also because you're in a social contract, you and the state, you're paying taxes, or you're required to keep certain things. And the state, when you're having a hard time, should be able to take care of you. Certain things, like I had said, were non-financial, allowing other forms of ID, particularly for older persons whose fingerprint were not able to be captured, or who have errors that were not of their own, doing ring fencing. And I want to get into this as well. I forgot to talk a bit about it when talking about financing. The other threat we are seeing to financing right now is, of course, there are austerity measures and fiscal consolidation being proposed. And one of our arguments has always been, you must ring fence. Certain things are so important. You look for anywhere else to cut, but don't come for social protection, don't come for health, don't come for education. They're really, really, really important. They're also helping the vulnerable, and also very important for us to be able to truly have inclusive growth. And then the last recommendation is really around debt, because I talked about where we could get the money through the, but now debt has become the other thing that is sucking a lot of money. As we take on a lot of debt, it means more of our budgets, and we're in the budget cycle right now. Most of our budget goes to servicing creditors. So there's less money available for you when you come and you say, I want money for social protection, I want money for health, I want money for education, which are all pressing needs that cannot wait. The thing that we've spoken more broadly about social protection. I want to take a minute and link it to climate and the discussions around that, because we can see right now, if there are Ugandans who doubt that climate change is here knocking at our door, then I think you need to wake up. Thank you for the knocking. But I think that one of the things that is very important is, as we are thinking about how to mitigate climate change, don't forget about social protection. And I'm appealing to the government officials, because social protection is so important to mitigating climate change. First of all, climate change is worsening our vulnerabilities, but it is also, at the same time, if you're thinking about how to get some of that climate financing to communities, then channeling it through social protection is extremely important. So that's just a snapshot of the findings. I'm really looking forward to when you all read the report. In terms of the methodology, which is just maybe the last thing, because I did get a bit of that question. We were looking at, for this report in particular, which was more of a literature review, so we're looking at government's own data, at World Bank data, and some of the government's data is published, some of the data is more internal, and also just really looking at the figures. And then with certain segments, the vulnerable groups in particular, we did have some interfaces. But we also do have a photo essay. So the photo essay that was outside, and I'm answering this now because I got questions on that. The photo essay was done earlier. It was last year, where we went to different communities to hear from people. One of the things the protocol emphasizes is participation of those who are supposed to be beneficiaries of social protection. So hearing from them, what is it like? What is your experience? Because sitting in Kampala, I have no idea what your experience is going to get, for example, a SAGE grant. So that is where that photo essay came from. And those are a few pictures that you saw outside. There's a whole photo essay on the website, and we shall also be giving out copies today. And the idea is to really stimulate this discussion. And yes, I'm being told my time is up. But thank you. This report was done by the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, and written also by RAISE, which is a Danish NGO, and from whom we are learning a lot in terms of what's happening in other countries as well.
Thank you very much, Alana. Let's just give her a round of applause. I think Isa has done a very good job trying to bring us to where we are right now. And I know my panelists were introduced earlier, but allow me to just give them a minute or two to just self-introduce. Please tell us your name, tell us why you are here today, and we would like to have from you right as we kickstart this discussion. We'll start with the panelist right next to me.
Hi, my name is Isabella Karpovic, and I represent the International Monetary Fund. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate.
We are glad to have you, Isabella.
Morning. I'm Lydia Navirio, Acting Assistant Commissioner, Equity and Rights, Department of Equity and Rights, the Directorate of Social Protection, Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner.
Yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nakazi Florence. I work as a research fellow at the Economic Policy Research Center. All we deal in are policy-related issues, so this topic is very pertinent. We look forward to your discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Isa, for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nona Tamale. I lecture at the School of Law, Makerere University, and I do research on financing for development.
We are glad to have you all, our panelists, Nona, Florence, and we'll start just at where we ended, looking at government's interventions in terms of social protection. Madam Lydia, if I may start with you, could you give us a glimpse in terms of where we are at as government of Uganda? What are our achievements in terms of social protection in this country, and are we where we should be?
Okay, thank you. For the benefit of everyone here, government of Uganda started thinking about social protection way back, and we see traces of planning for social protection right from the second Poverty Eradication Action Plan, the National Development Plan 1, National Development Plan 2, National Development Plan 3. We are actually still thinking of taking it to the National Development Plan 4. Social protection is defined in our National Social Protection Policy 2015 as public and private interventions to address risks and vulnerabilities which expose individuals to income insecurity and social deprivation, leading to undignified lives. So we are really looking at interventions that are done by government or public sector, but also private sector. So all the support that the older persons are talking about, we still count it as social protection. So what have we been able to achieve as government? I've already talked about the planning. Any government policy or intervention has to find its room within the planning framework. So whenever we discuss anything, the question is, do we have this in our planning frameworks? So the fact that we have it in the Uganda Vision 2040, the fact that we have it in the National Development Plan is also a critical achievement. Otherwise, if it is not anywhere within the plans, it means that you cannot even think about budgeting for it or even planning for it. So that is a key thing we were able to achieve. But also the fact that in 2010, Cabinet made a decision to implement the social assistance grants for empowerment as a pilot program. That cabinet decision, again, we find it to be a key achievement, because without it, we wouldn't even have this discussion of I'm left out, she's not here. But the fact that cabinet made that decision and allowed the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development to implement the pilot social assistance grants for empowerment program, for us, we believe, is it has enabled us to move to where we are. And from that cabinet decision in 2011, government started implementing the social assistance grants for empowerment program. So the fact that the cash transfer was actually delivered in Uganda by the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, again, we find that to be an achievement, because as we started, everybody believed, you can't talk about giving money in this country, you're going to create dependency, it is not sustainable. But government took the firm decision to allow the implementation, and we've had stories from the beneficiaries. We've also had evaluations that have been made. I think Alana has referred to one of them to indicate the findings that it wasn't a waste of time to invest in social assistance grants for empowerment. And as we started that journey, we started with 14 pilot districts that were supported with development partner funds, and government provided the staff, because without the staff, the implementation again wouldn't have been possible. But the government provided the staff at the center, which is the national level, but also at the local government level, to be able to support the older persons register, enroll, and be able to receive payments for the social assistance grant for empowerment. Again, for those that have been around, but for the benefit of others, in Karamoja, we started at the age of 60 years, and for the other districts in the pilot, it was 65 years and above. We were able to successfully implement the pilot, and the government allowed us to proceed to have an increment of districts. And at that point, I remember the decision was to register the 100 oldest persons per sub-county. We did that for the next 2 years, from 2016 to 2018, after which government decided to have a national rollout of the senior citizens grant. And with this, we have been able to achieve national coverage of the program, though the age is 80 years, but the policy decision was we start with 80 years due to the available funds, and as resources become available, the age would be reduced. And at this point, we've been having discussions on lowering that age, but also allowing other aspects to be taken into consideration to determine who benefits. And one of the aspects that has been considered is disability, to be able to enroll for the program.
And Lydia, if I could just pick a little bit on what you're saying. From what I'm hearing is that we've made steps, yes, and very much progress since we started out as a country. But we also noticed that there are challenges. Could you speak a little bit on some of those challenges and just spotlight just a few in a minute or two?
Okay. So the challenges, of course, right from the discussion we had Jaja here speak, one of the challenges is limited coverage, but also the financing, which has impacted on who benefits, because ideally, from the policy presentation, an older person is 60 years and above. So if resources permitted, all the older person 60 years and above would be able to benefit. But because of the limited resources, we started with 80 years. But the other challenge are the policy decision we took to use the NIRA data, where we require every eligible person to present a national ID. So the national ID has had some challenges, especially the errors on the data, with older persons who should be eligible being indicated as young. So they would ideally, if you looked at the data itself, they wouldn't qualify. But if you actually did a field visit, you'd actually realize that they qualify to be enrolled. We've also had challenges of limited appreciation and understanding of social protection and the role it plays in national development. Some people believe it's a waste of time, and yet it is a critical intervention by government. It shows government's social contract with the citizens, but also that there are benefits to the economy from the resources that are given to the beneficiaries of social protection interventions.
And thank you very much, Lydia, for truly pointing out the fact that as a country, we gain a lot when we are able to implement effectively our social protection measures. The report does state that just by introducing SEDGE, we had poverty reduced by 20%. And I'd like to talk a little bit more on some of the fiscal considerations that we need to take into regard when we are putting out such programs as this. And that brings me to you, Isabella. from an IMF perspective, we have had that they are truly economic challenges with the government of Uganda trying to ensure that we have social protection for all persons. How can we, looking at these challenges and the intersection of fiscal considerations, could you perhaps just spotlight how we can create a bit of a balance, truly, and if it's even truly possible, given our economic situation as a country?
Thank you for the question. First of all, the report is excellent. Congratulations on the report. Alana just stepped out, so she's not here to hear my praise, but I'm always very positively surprised by how thorough her presentations are, and I feel like there's not much I can add to it. But let me tell you a little bit of what I see as challenges, including the fiscal ones that you are mentioning. First of all, longevity has increased in this country. Let's not forget that. There are many more octogenarians today than even 20 years ago. Poverty has also increased, and we don't know by how much, but we know this has happened due to the COVID-19 shock across the continent, across the world actually. And the forthcoming UBOS census and household survey may be able to shed some light on how far we went into the wrong direction following a very successful decade of sustained poverty reduction. So if anything, more resources are needed today than in the past. And those resources are not there. Because in addition to the increased poverty and the longevity, all the governments have added 10% of GDP on top of their existing debt. And this is the situation in Uganda too. We are in a very favorable situation actually, because Uganda's debt is still sustainable. But in many other countries it is not, and they are undergoing very painful restructuring of the debt. So the Ugandan government is doing everything that is possible to avoid this situation. And that reduces the resources for development, for infrastructure, for social spending, for social protection spending across the board. What we have been trying to do under the program that is financed by the IMF is to preserve spending on social sectors and on social protection. We have 2 spending floors within the program, one of which is on social protection. So the hope was to increase over time the resources for social protection. But because of multiple shocks that the country underwent, even after COVID with the inflation shock, we were barely able to maintain the budgets as they were and increase a little bit. So definitely one of the main challenges is the lack of funds, and this lack of funds is also seen in the declining funding of the old programs that we knew of. So we talk about Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, the Youth Livelihood Program, but also other programs such as Operation Wealth Creation, the NUSAP. We have seen the budgets of those programs decreasing over time. There are, however, new programs. There is a parish development model, and in my view, we have to work with it. We have to work with what we have. Louder, I'll try. The social protection program, one thing you will see in the report is that the social protection programs are fragmented. There are very many. It is difficult to put a number on them. I said, we see the values decreasing, however you take it, whether in nominal terms, in real terms, in percent of, in per capita terms. But the fact that they are fragmented and difficult to put a number on is just one side of the story. The other side, I believe that Alana mentioned, is that some of them are funded by developing partners, and that funding is not going to stay forever, which brings me to the sustainability of those programs, right? So we have to continue to make an effort to keep the resources available by advocating, but also doing research, and this is what ISAR's contribution is very important, to highlight where the gaps are. Which part of the population is not covered? How can we reach that population? The fact that the money is there and that we strive to increase the capitation does not necessarily mean that we're reaching the people that need the grants. And the examples we have heard today from some of the beneficiaries of the social senior citizen grant give us, and the exhibition outside, give us a flavor of what is going on. In order to, other parts of spending are crucial in allowing access to those grants. If there is no infrastructure to reach a center where the person needs to get the national identification number and obtain the senior citizen grant, then he or she will not obtain it. If women do not own productive assets and do not have the right for land, they will not going to be able to access the funds under the Operation Wealth Creation or the parish development models. So investing in all of these areas, eliminating access constraints to those funds is as important as increasing funding for social protection. We have to enable people to access those funds. So I've talked a lot. We can maybe give a chance to others to speak. Thanks.
I hope, oh, wonderful. Thank you very much, Isabella. You spotlight an issue around debt. And hearing from community stories, the question around Uganda's debt is not only a national question, but it's very much individual. And when we are unable to spend on health, for example, to have social protection measures put in place for older persons, then we notice that the burden, the personal burden on debt, actually then shifts to people, and we've seen that move into private debt, just and beyond public debt. But I'd like to get a little bit more into the debt discussion. And Lydia, if it's okay, you could pass the mic on to Madame Nona Tamale. When we are talking about Uganda's debt levels, and Isabella says we are at a point where we are sustainable, right? I'd like to pick your mind on this, Nona. How do Uganda's debt levels impact on our ability to fund social protection? And can we for sure say we are at a level where we shouldn't be worried about it? Or are there specific interventions that we can be able to put in place now?
All right, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and the previous panelists that have laid the foundation for this discussion. So I was very interested, yes, when Isabel was speaking about the debt, because I hold a slightly different view. So why? When we think about social protection, I am glad Alana raised this. It's beyond just thinking about the social assistance program. It's more wholesome. That includes our spending on public education and our spending on public health. And as has been rightly pointed out, our debt has grown, our debt burden has grown. I think the Auditor General's report of last year says we are at a 52% debt to GDP ratio. And usually I see people, especially on Twitter, saying, but our debt isn't a problem, you know. There's countries that have debt to GDP ratios that are much higher than that. And what always comes to mind is it's not necessarily just how much debt we hold, but how is that debt burden affecting our expenditure on our SDGs? And I think if I use the broader language of SDGs, or we could say human rights, we could say public services, it's broad. And thinking about it in that lens, we see that our debt burden does inhibit our expenditure on SDGs, but also specifically for purposes of this discussion, social protection. If I could just share some detail, more detail, the Ministry of Finance's debt sustainability analysis report from last year actually shows that we're spending around 32% of our revenues on servicing of debt. Right, so as we have a discussion about where the resources are coming from, we are taking out about almost a third of our money on debt. Specifically, when you look at expenditure on health and education, for instance, we spent around 4 times more on debt than we did on health between 2019 and 2021, and this is according to UN trade and development data, right? When we think about domestic debt specifically, we spent about 2.5% more on domestic debt interest payments than our education. So when I'm thinking broadly about social protection, before we even get into specifically the disbursed programs that we have, we are already, it's affecting how we spend on key sectors that protect us during shocks, right? And what does that have to do when we think about it in the broader sustainability argument? And I'm glad Isabel is here. I know the IMF is currently doing a review of their debt sustainability framework for low-income countries. And one of the criticisms that has been made, including by the UN, is the way debt sustainability is being measured. And a key factor has come out is, we are thinking a lot about ability to repay creditors. But we have to also think about it as a country at a national level. How are we actually spending? It should count for debt sustainability how much we are spending on our social sectors, on protecting people from shocks, right? And as we've discussed, that cuts across the health, the education, and social protection. So lastly, just to conclude, I think thinking about sustainability more from repaying of our debt to creditors to more broadly how we're investing in SDGs and now climate discussion, because we have to also be able to adequately prepare people from for climate shocks.
And you now introduce another topic on its own around climate change and financing and how that then interlinks with social protection. But you do say us something around our debt to GDP ratio and how we are measuring debt as a country. And the good thing we have the IMF with us today. And so, and before I come to Florence on the question of climate, I'd like you, Isabel, to just respond briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to qualify my response, because my statement, because I completely agree with what you're saying. What we mean when we say that is not sustainable, we mean the country cannot service its debt anymore. It means you're in distress. No one wants to lend to that country. The banks say no. You have to go back and think about how to restructure it. But there is a broader idea, and this is the cost of that. And the cost of that is extremely high. It is high for the entire continent, and it's partly reflection on what is happening in the advanced economies. But it is very high for Uganda specifically. And the debt service competes with all these other priorities you're having, such as infrastructure, social spending, social protection spending. So over the longer term, if the borrowing costs cannot be lowered through global lowering of interest rates, reforms that the government needs to implement in order to at least maintain the situation as it is, then we would be at the risk of going into a non-sustainable position. I also must say that when we think about our 20-year baseline and looking into the debt sustainability, we don't project any shocks. I cannot say 5 years from now there is going to be an earthquake and that will lower the GDP growth, But one has to be ready for those shocks as well and build buffers. And therefore, if anything, has to think about how to lower the financing needs, how to mobilize revenues in order to rely on borrowing for development in the future. Thank you. I hope this answer satisfies you, Nadia.
I like that we are really getting into the meat of it. And you raise something around shocks, right? And we've seen more and more that we've had climate change come into play. Increasingly, we've seen the effects of it. But Florence, if I can just pick your mind around climate change and particularly looking at the effects of climate change on social protection. How do you propose that the social protection measures that we are trying to put in place, and if there are any, can mitigate the effects of climate change? And as a country, where are we at on this climate change spectrum?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you very much for the previous speakers. To bring in the topic on climate change, as mentioned by the presenter, Alana, of course, gone are the days when we used to think vulnerability is only in terms of poverty. But now we see the climate change issues very, very close to us, and we are working with them. Because I can take an example of last year when the rains came in too much. That means for whoever had beans, no wonder at the beginning of the year, we only had maize and never had beans. Right now, when everybody is expecting to plant, because one of our grandmas said how she's surviving is basically to till land. But when these come and they sweep everything, so what happens next? Before we dig deep into that, Elizabeth requested me to highlight how far, what is Uganda doing as far as climate change is concerned. All I can say that Uganda as a nation is not sleeping. We have a national climate change policy of 2015. So here we lay out a number of plans on how we are going to mitigate and adapt to climate change. But what is very critical here, that even in our plan, 70% of it is basically relying on external funding. So even in climate change, apart from social protection things, there is out of reliance on what? On donor funding. We are looking that even when we go ahead as a country, when we look at the planning for 2023-2024, under the National Crops, Environment, Climate Change, and that program, they allocated only 547 billions for that year. And yet in the plan we said, in our climate change plan, that we as a country, we are supposed to be spending over 255 millions per year. So you just look at this, that even the money that we are planning for a whole program is just too minimal for anything to take off. So what are we going to do? Right now, when it's like the life cycle hypothesis, everybody is exposed to climate change. Just imagine if a mother is stealing and all they're depending on are the beans and the rest, those are gone. That means somebody gets affected right away when you're a baby. So what we are talking about, climate change, is not only for the adults, the elder we are seeing, but it's for every one of us. So in summary, all we can do, because he said, what are some, the question went, how should we think social protection can effectively mitigate the effects of climate change? So one way we've seen social protection being effective is basically the times when they are compensating whoever is affected. We've seen the Bududa landslides, the Kasese floods that swept everything, including the hospitals that government had set up. So that means at that time, of course, we see social protection in all the circles, I hear education. That time when there is a catastrophe, we cannot even wait. You just want to get an immediate solution. So that is one way we're seeing social protection in a way, mitigating people who have been affected by climate change. So the other way we can look at is where we come up with packages. Of course, as mentioned by one of the speakers, we have fragmented approaches. When you read through the whole cycle of social protection, everybody is coming in with their small packages. So how do we put things together? And we say, okay, if we are going to give out this money, are we adding any component that somebody should be able, because we saw the Nutri-Cash giving only mothers, the girls empowering girls here in Kampala. So everybody is coming in with their small package. Can we look at an area where we have a package, that there is this package, okay, we are giving you money, but maybe this money, I may take an example of maybe the NUSAF labor-intensive works. Unfortunately, all these ended in 2021, partly because we didn't have funds. But that could be an idea where I say, okay, for everybody who is able, whatever, can come and work. When you work on either this road, the money that we're giving, don't just go ahead and eat. Save some, maybe put something in business. Such that as a way, you're earning this money to build your resilience. Not only that time when you get it, eat and finish like an elder one, but you can do a comprehensive way.
Thank you, Florence. You raise a critical question around sustainability.
Yes.
And where the current interventions that we have are indeed sustainable. Hence the need for people to save, hence the need for people to plan. But it brings me to the question of what about the role of government in this particular instance? And if you could just help me pass that mic to Madam Lydia. I would like to ask you, Madam Lydia, is the challenge around the sporadic social protection interventions everywhere and not really having something more uniform, more concrete based on the legislative gaps? And if so, then how can we strengthen our legal framework? The report does spotlight the need to have the ratification of the AU Protocol on Social Protection. Is this something that we can do? And just give us your take on that.
Thank you. I wouldn't say the programs are donor supported because of lack of a policy of a law. Not necessarily, because already within the National Social Protection Policy, we developed that policy using a life cycle approach. So the government position was to acknowledge the fact that every person, right from when they are still in their mother's womb, needs to have some kind of social protection. It doesn't necessarily have to be the cash transfer, but it can be the social care and support for those working, social security, so that they are able to save for the future or for retirement, or when they get an injury, or when they have a disability. And we have been having discussions with our development partners to see to it that they support the government position and the policy priorities. So we are, right now we have had some discussions on ensuring that we have comprehensive social protection services delivered across the life cycle. So still the development partners that you've shared that are implementing child-sensitive social protection, the girls empowering girls, are all coming together to see that we can put money in one basket to be able to support social protection across the life cycle. But speaking about the legislation, already we have some legislations in place. For instance, when we are discussing all aspects to do with children, we have that law. When we're discussing disability, we have the Persons with Disabilities Act 2020. For Social Security, we have the NSSF Act 22 CAPA 222, but also the amendment in 2021 that allows for midterm access, but also voluntary contributions. We believe, of course, that if we had a comprehensive law regarding social protection, it would make it have a stronger case for both in terms of ensuring one-stop center for all the social protection interventions, but also strengthening that legislative framework.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Yes, you make a very good case for us to have a strengthened legal framework. And I wonder, do we have any other measures that we can be able to put in place to ensure more inclusive social protection for everyone? And that brings me to you, Nona. You talked about the budget and the debt burden on Uganda. And I'm wondering, are there any economic strategies that, as a country, we can pursue to be able to balance some of these debt obligations and ensure that we are actually delivering social protection for everyone?
All right, thank you again, Liz. I think Alana mentioned in her presentation, and I think also this features partly in the report, under financing, as well as the AU Protocol on Social Protection. Just thinking about the financing strategies around social protection. One thing that cuts across, that has come strongly is, of course, taxation, because That's one of the main sources of domestic revenues that we can use to be able to invest in social protection. And I know taxation is a really heated issue right now in the country and of the informal sector, but I want us to discuss more around corporate tax, the tax of specifically looking at tax exemptions that Alana mentioned. So for years, there's been debate about whether we really need some of these tax exemptions, and the argument has been that the companies that are receiving these tax exemptions are helping to create jobs for Ugandans. And I was really glad to see the Auditor General's report of last year that assessed tax exemptions. I was surprised by the information. I did not know that it comes down to only about 36 companies receiving around 1.4 trillion in tax exemptions. And because of the argument of being able to gauge whether we're getting benefit from it, I was actually intrigued by the fact that most of them are actually not meeting the employment threshold that's required, the 50% of Ugandans being employed. I think in the report he mentioned that of 36 companies, 22 are not meeting that threshold, right? And Alana mentioned that we do lose revenues, so there's the question of lost revenues that we could be using to fund social protection. But the other angle is we actually also pay, because the Ministry of Finance actually pays on behalf of some of these companies that receive tax exemptions. And for just the financial year 2022-2023, the report indicates that they paid around 500 billion to those companies, right? And so now the question goes back to, and this is something even the parliament has raised, right? Doing a continuous cost benefit analysis of tax exemptions in the country, because I believe that's a really big pool of resources that could be used to actually be improving social spending. We're not saying there's completely no value from tax exemptions. They could be, but we need to be able as citizens to see the value of exemptions of this nature when we are not just losing in terms of potential revenues, but are actually losing revenues to some of these, through some of these exemptions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nona. It seems as a country we are paying companies not to pay our taxes. And it's disheartening from what you are saying. And you make a very good case around what we can do as a country. And we hope that the policymakers within the room are taking note of some of these recommendations. And allow me to get to you, Isabella. I've just been informed that we are at the point where we should be launching. And just very quickly pick your mind. Uganda is not an island. Other countries like us have faced the same challenges. What are the successful approaches that we can be able to incorporate right now to ensure social protection for all?
Well, first of all, I do believe that funding for social protection needs to be increased. But also, I noticed that there is, what we are undergoing is an ideological shift away from social protection towards industrialization. It seems that increasingly the government is placing more weight on programs that we are going to be able, or should be able, to put people in the position to productively contribute to the economy, and through growth and industrialization, we'll be able to exit poverty. It's important to acknowledge this shift, because we have to live with it. We have to live with a parish development model. And that is not a social protection program, but it can be made to look a little bit more like it. It would be possible to exploit the synergies that are now being developed at a very low subnational level, which are crucial in identifying the poor and reaching them. This is something that, yes, could be leveraged in order to, if we could, let's say, introduce a social protection component into that program, that could be something that could strengthen the overall social safety net. there are many examples of successful programs. Latin America is a continent which is probably at the forefront. One of the most popular programs is the Brazilian Bolsa Familia, and it has this very high decentralization component. It is such a strong program that when the the whole world underwent the COVID-19 pandemic, Brazil said, okay, wait a minute, we don't need another program in order to reach the poor. We already have a good program. We just have to scale it and increase the funding under that program. So this is just to link to the issue of fragmentation I talked about earlier. Having very many short-lived programs is not necessarily the best way to reach the poor. Yes, I think this is basically what I wanted to say. Then, there is a lot of program design issues that we could discuss, and this is simplicity, monitoring, evaluation, grievance mechanisms. You touched upon all of this into your report. They are extremely important. A participatory process on the ground, mechanism that allow people to raise their concerns, that can be heard, addressed, reported, and yes, incorporated into the program design in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause as our minister enters. Honorable Minister, you're very welcome to this event. You found us right at the tail end of this panel discussion. And I would like...
So one way we can reach out to those is by expanding coverage. I think this even was mentioned by the board chair. So right now, of course, we are struggling with the resources. They are very limited. So there is that eligible kind of category of people who have the money, but maybe in one way they are not in formal employment, so they are not tapped. So with those ones, through the contributory kind of system, those particular individuals can be reached out. So government needs to come up with innovative ways, because some of the regulatory frameworks that we are seeing that is regulating this is also missing out. Of course, we are seeing efforts by Mazima, Kasita to bring in the informal workers. So that is one reliable way that government is not going to spend a lot, but you voluntarily contribute to this, to your old age kind of protection. Then the other way we cannot run from, as mentioned by other speakers, is how we mobilize our resources. So domestic revenue mobilization, we will not run away from it. So how we consolidate what we have and see how we can use the minimal resources to do productive work is also greatly welcome. And lastly, much as most of the social grants are donor funded, there is no way you're going to run away from the donors. It is how we lobby, set up systems, because in many ways we've seen in papers how we mishandle resources. So those could also be some hindering factors. So we need to go back, try to streamline, put things together, and we keep lobbying, because as a developing country, we cannot stand on our own. I submit, Madam Lee. Thank you.
And you submit rightly, so if I may say. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Lydia, Florence, and Nona. You've done a great job just discussing the report. I hope by now we've all managed to receive copies of the report. And if you're like me and our panelists here and you haven't gotten one will be brought to you. Allow me at this juncture, hand back to our Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Brian.
All right, thank you very much. And once again, let's clap for our eminent panelists. I think the discussion was very comprehensive. We can all agree. And also for the able moderation by Miss Elizabeth Atori. And now, without much further ado, we shall be getting to the part where we launch the research report. And I would like to invite
thank you so much. And particularly for the panel, which really widened the discussion, and also to recognize Honorable Balam, who is in the house. We appreciate you making it. We know you're in a different event across town in Entebbe. So thank you so much for making the time. And just to recap what our research findings were, is that Uganda is making some good progress on social protection. But we can and should do more. Some of the hurdles we have seen are not even financing. We heard from some older persons in this room, one of them who just has not been able to get her money, even though she's 80, all the requirements are met. I later learned that she was still seated in a bank somewhere. We also learned, of course, that throughout the life cycle, there are certain gaps. So, for example, if you're in the informal sector and you're working age, there are real gaps there around social protection. Even if you're younger as well, and that we should have a life cycle approach to it. We also heard very strongly from government officials in discussing the research that Uganda is committed to do so. And some of these things are already being put in policy. And now it's to make sure that gets translated into implementation. And the key thing was financing. The panel you just walked in on was really substantially discussing financing. And I think there was substantial agreement that money can be found if we can begin to curb some of these leakages around corruption, around maybe unjustified tax exemptions or illicit financial flows. Because someone noted, and I think it was Dr. Nyende, board chair, who noted that social protection is so integral. It is actually built into our culture, the idea that we look out for each other, that when things are tough, the state is able to step in and assist. And that also makes it, as Nona was mentioning, more people are more compliant, pay taxes when they feel the state has got their back. So that was a short recap, but in terms of the research, as Isa and Reyes and together Ministry of Gender, we've been assessing this because the African Union, African member states passed a protocol in 2022 on the African Charter on Human People's Rights, on the rights of citizens to social protection and social security. And it came out actually following COVID to say we must plan and do better for our people so we can cushion them. Climate change is now a big issue, as you know, so some people are dealing with failed harvests and so forth. So government's role as someone that cushions. So that is just a quick recap. At this point, I would like to invite Commissioner Bernard Mujuni from the Ministry of Gender make some remarks before inviting the Honorable Minister to launch the report. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Alana, the Honorable Minister, the representative of the IMF, honorable members of Parliament, leaders of different organizations, technical people from different MDAs. First, I want to extend regards from my permanent secretary. This morning, we are appearing before the Parliamentary Committee on Budget Affairs, and he is supposed to have come, according to the invite, requested me to put on his shoes. And so, mine is just a simple message, which I should have said in the morning, and that we, for a long time, Honorable Minister, have been implementing social protection programs in this country, and but these are programs, these are resources programmed to help the vulnerable and the poor. Since the programming is going on well, we will need to match up the legal aspect of it so that we protect these programs. If we don't protect these programs legally, or codify them, then they stand to be washed away. The budget cuts will be coming at the whims of Parliament, and then any other change in leadership can easily erode these programs away. And this is the key mandate that we committed to the African Union Commission. But also we had a big lesson during COVID, so we can't wait for the accident to happen again. Honorable Minister, we welcome your robust energy. We know that you've been doing a lot in this area. You help a lot of vulnerable groups, I know, personally. You help a lot of older persons, personally. You help them as an individual, but also you have helped them to connect them to different funding platforms, including Emyoga, including PDM, and I'm sure the support has been quite overwhelming. And this is the time for us to put our house together and come together between the civil society, the private sector, and government to make sure that we join synergies to address the challenge. With those few remarks, Honorable Minister, allow me to invite you to give your remarks and grace the closure of this occasion. Thank you so much. Thank you. Please clap for me also. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Members of Parliament present, the representative of IMF, ladies and gentlemen, our friends, members of the Fourth Estate, I'm glad to be with you. When I came in, I went to that table. I moved to the other table of those old people. The other day, parents tried to inquire whether the elderly, they are receiving their small contribution given to them by government. To my surprise, the other old woman, who must be above 70, she wasn't able to, she has not been paid anything yet. The minister has discovered the money, her money is available in Centenary Bank, but nobody has ever bothered to reach out to her to ensure that she gets her justice. Social protection is a right, and it's our right that we must, it's our duty as young people to support those old people. And it's a responsibility of government and technocrats to ensure the programs of government are well implemented. I'm honored to be here with you this afternoon to launch a report on the African Union Protocol to the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights and the rights of citizens to social protection and social security. The Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development has been at the forefront of efforts to enhance social protection in Uganda, recognizing its fundamental component of sustainable development and poverty eradication. We as government, we look forward to have the SDG 1 and SDG 2 by 2030, where people should not be poor and also where people should not lack what to eat. So we don't need anger in our society, and that should be our aim. Over the years, the ministry has spearheaded the various initiatives aimed at spearheaded the various initiatives aimed at expanding access to social protection programs and service for the vulnerable population across the country. Notable achievements include the formulation and adoption of the National Social Protection Policy 2015, which provide comprehensive framework for the design and implementation of social protection intervention. Additionally, the ministry has played a key role in the establishment and scaling up of the flagship program, such as the Social Assistance Grant for Empowerment. And with government full financing, raising up to 2 billion in 2011 to 121 billion. My ministry is also implementing the Social Enterprises Grant for older persons aged 60 to 79 and the Social Grant for the person with disability. Through this strategic partnership with the development partners like IMF, civil society groups, organizations, and other stakeholders, the ministry continue to champion, this cause, and we look forward to enhance them and to implement them. Your honorable member of parliament, it is sad that some of these things are being done, but others are being neglected due to weaknesses of some of the implementers. But with the new energy, this won't happen. We are going to follow up all these implementation to the dot, and that I pledge on behalf of our ministry. The research report we are launching today was spearheaded by the initiative of the Social and Economic Rights and the Research Action for Income Security. underscores the extent of our compliance with international framework. This research benchmarks existing social protection programs against the African Union Protocol to the African Charter of Human and People's Rights on the rights of citizens, social security. So, our dear guests, I think we are on the right track. We are trying to benchmark with the best players on the continent and in the world, and I believe we shall get there. As a ministry, leading coordination of social protection and intervention focusing on the life cycle and human rights approach, ratification of the African Union Protocol on social protection and stands as a pivotal step towards solidifying our commitment to safeguarding the rights of our citizens. It's blueprint for fostering inclusive growth, ensuring well-being of all members of our society in Uganda. I thank the organizers of and the development partners for the support and toward social protection programming, and I reaffirm our commitment to social protection and human rights. With these few remarks, allow me to conclude by stating that I commit on behalf of government, following up on the step towards effective engagement and consultation for ratification of the protocol. I look forward to sustained partnership with you. I now take this moment to launch the report on African Union Protocol on the rights of citizens, social protection, and social security. Balamba Rugahara Tenyi, Minister of State for Youth and Children Affairs. I thank you. Let me ask the members of parliament present, the IMF representative, the commissioner, who's a technical person who are in charge of implementation of these programs, to join me here as we launch this. So this report is how does Uganda measure up the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on rights of citizens to social protection and social right. How does Uganda measure up? I think we are measuring up fairly, but we shall improve more and more to be excellent. Allow me commission this report. bamaama ab'entaawo mukono tusanyusa okubalaba. Omubaka wa paalamenti atutegeezezza nti ssente zammwe temuzifunanga ez'obukadde, naye bwe tuviira wano olwaleero mu ruumu eno abo abakulu abavunaanyizibwa ku ssente ezo bagenda zibawa. So bagenda zibawa olwaleero, ate tebagenda koma kumwe mweka, bagenda kunoonya n'abakadde abalala bonna abatafunanga ssente zaabwe. Tulabe nti mu guno omwezi bwe gugwerako ogwo gujja by mid-May abakadde bafune alawensi zaabwe ze babasuubiza, kubanga ddembe lyammwe okuzifuna. Mukama abakuume.
Honorable Minister and our distinguished guests, we have an exhibition. Whilst you are away, we managed to have a guided tour of the exhibition. We would like also to guide you through the tour so that you can see it. And then thereafter, we would also want to have a group photo with you. Okay. Very quickly.
As the Honorable Minister and the other group go to the gallery, just to let us all know that if you have a question that you like to present, we're going to be having a brief plenary session after when we come in, and then we shall be setting off for our lunch. So if you have any question, be ready with it, and we shall be doing that after that activity. Colleagues, if you can step out briefly, there's going to be a group photo just outside with the Honorable Minister and the team. So if you could just briefly step out. If you can step out and we have the group photo, that would be great. If you're intending to go for the group picture, please, now would be a great time to step out. All right, if we are done with the photo session, please let's get back in the room and have the session, the plenary session. Any concerns that came throughout the discussion, the findings in response to some of the things that were said by the panelists, we're getting into that session. So please come back in the room. Okay. Yes, colleagues, now is the time. I hope Alana is Alana in here. Yes, we are going in for the plenary, and I see we already have some hands up. Yes. I'm trying to find the other microphone. Yes, it's over here. Yes, colleagues, we're starting the plenary session and people will be asking questions. So let's settle in. Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Henry Semakula. I work with the Ministry of Education. Thanks for all the people who have spoken to us, including the Honorable Minister and our dear panelists. Just about 4 quick observations. We are considering issues of security and protection for our elderly. And I know that among the elderly are men and women. But one quick observation I've made is that we seem to be putting more attention to the female elderly. And I've seen that right from the exhibition. I think I see only about one man or two. I've seen that from the panel setting. There was no man on the panel. Yes, very true. I can also see that even the representatives of the elderly who came, there was no man. Yet, in my view, the men actually have very many challenges as well. If we even go psychological, we know they have more mental health challenges because they are often left to suffer alone. The children and the grandchildren normally prefer going to Jaja Mushala than Jaja Mwami. So my request is that next time we have a similar event, let's involve the elderly men as much as possible. Number two, I come from the education sector and I know education is an equalizer. And if we want all our beneficiaries to really benefit, we should try as much as possible to educate them about available opportunities, including having them receive first-hand information. One of the judges indicated, but how can we make them know better? Let's use all the forum close to them. Because if we use NTV and NBS, they may not know what is happening. So the forums close to them include Ekizindalo Chomuchalo, that megaphone in the village, the church, the mosque, and so on. Those are avenues through which they can really quickly get information and then know what is happening. As I wind up, the other three issues are about the observation on the amount of money Jaja uses to go to collect his package, her package. Whereas we are doubting whether it can be 20 or 30, it could be true that it is actually that. Because Jaja may be living in a village which is about 7 kilometers away from the venue of collection. And indeed, the border taking you for 7 kilometers should be something around 5,000 plus. And remember, this is an elderly person who should not use one border going and another one coming, because they even don't have time and energy to go and stop another one. So it is likely that that one is hired the whole day. So it ends up being a wastage of time. I'm going to collect 25. I use 20, and there are challenges. And finally, how I request that we reorganize the way of handing over this package for them. Why don't we take it to their homes? Because I see the elderly really having far more challenges in traveling to a certain venue. First of all, the MP indicated they are very fragile. They have their pressure, amaguru gabaluma, they are going to walk long distances, and so on and so forth. So it is all risk on their side. Ladies and gentlemen, you could recall that recently the papers reported that one of the elder actually died in the line to getting that money. So if we must avoid all those challenges, I pray we change the modality of handing over the money so that we take it to them and save them from all those other inconveniences. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
The microphone is in here.
Yes,
so
please.
I think it is just okay. Thank you very much, organizers, but also the participants who are here. I think I just want to add a little bit of my voice to the panelists. Just adding a few thoughts that I had when I was hearing what they were saying. First, I want to say that poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. It doesn't matter where it is. The second thing I want to say is that social protection is an indispensable intervention, and we need to wake up if we are still sleeping, because the real cause of poverty is not lack of money, but rather risk and vulnerability. Social protection is not a consumption expenditure. It is a development expenditure. And the time doesn't allow me to elaborate on that. But also to say that government of Uganda has demonstrated commitment to implement social protection by way of the policy that was approved by Cabinet in 2015. The policy we have in place is a very comprehensive policy. We only need to understand it. I think the challenge we are having, sometimes when we come to a forum like this, we speak to ourselves. We have many people who should be understanding this policy who do not yet understand. But having said that, I want to come to the issue that was discussed at length, and that is the issue of debt. I think the moderator asked a question, and I recorded it exactly the way she asked. How does Uganda's debt impact on the country's ability to fund social protection? I want to say that the debt burden of Uganda right now could be an opportunity rather than a threat. Why do I say could be an opportunity? Because if some of us who are here, who have been here for perhaps 20 years or more, you recall the times of the HIPIC initiative, the highly indebted poor countries initiative, when the lenders at that time made a decision that instead of poor countries paying back the debts, that money would be converted to funding education, health services. I think that is the time when we came up with programs like UPE and universal, and we came up with the free healthcare services. That money was actually relocated to that. So what I would think that one of the advocacy points that we need to begin to move forward is we need to, instead of going to the donors to ask them to give us grants and more money or whatever it is, why don't we begin to initiate for what we call debt relief, which should be directed towards implementing social protection. At that time, we did not have social protection. Now we have social protection. Because, to be honest, if you're going to pay this debt, if Uganda is going to pay this debt, it has to raise money from taxes. But you are raising money from a very small market, because the majority of the people don't have the purchasing power. So I think we should look at this as an opportunity and begin in negotiating for debt relief, which should be directed towards social protection. And then the other thing which I think the moderator commented on, which I think is, I think let me just make this the last point, that everyone has come up with small packages. I agree with that. But the reason is, I think when after Minister of Gender had formulated this policy, people now forgot that actually the Minister of Gender is the lead agency, is the coordinating agency. So everybody is doing their things everywhere. I think time has come when the mandate of the Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development should be respected, so that we are coordinating everything. And not, things shouldn't be imposed on us, but we should be coordinating and agreeing on what are the priorities in terms of social protection for this country. And this, what I'm saying right now, links exactly to what I've said earlier on in terms of debt relief, in terms of, redirecting the money for paying debts into social protection. Minister of Gender should be the key agency to actually decide, okay, let me say recommend, not to say decide, to recommend which are the kind of programs that should benefit from that kind of debt relief. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zephania. And I think you really added to the discussion. I was seeing some of the panelists here nodding their heads in agreement. So maybe I think Mr. Semakula also had comments that really made sense in terms of access to information at the grassroots level. And I think that's also something that ISA has been very intentional about doing in terms of fostering, having barazas and having discussions with the relevant stakeholders at that level. And now, I know that there are still very many questions, so we shall take, this gentleman over here had a question. If we can move the microphone to him.
Secondly, if I try to log in, it doesn't go through. And how can other people get access to this so that they can also give in their opinions and suggestions? Thank you.
You mean the QR code isn't working? You cannot log in? Okay, maybe that can be, yeah, let it be tested and they will be able to get to you still. Can we move the microphone to the gentleman over here from Cabinet Secretariat, I think? Yes. Is it on?
Thank you. Once again, I'm called James Owachi. I work in Cabinet Secretariat as a principal policy analyst. I have got a few comments, and I think I'll try to keep them candid. Number one, I want to appreciate Ministry of Gender and your partners for prioritizing research in the great public matter of concern of social policy. I want to appreciate this because research is the preferred mode of evidence that we look for if we have got to carry out plausible public policy management, whether they are formulation, whether they are reviews, whatever that we want to achieve out of public policy. So I want to appreciate that and really encourage that is the way to go. The issue of NERA, that was very, very touching. And NERA is not alone. There are many other agencies where we have got such hurdles in formulating and implementing public policy. Really exposes some of the weaknesses that we should have managed yesterday in both our policy formulation as well as our implementation. We all know that one of the key tenets of public policy, regulatory good practice generally, is ensuring inclusiveness in both formulation and implementation of public policy. When you have the procedures at NERA making it impossible for the most, beneficiaries from accessing what is due to them, totally, hurdles which are making it impossible to implement policies, then we need to go back to the very modality through which we create these policies. So we are not inclusive enough when we are creating the policies. We don't respect some of those important practices. We still have challenges with the implementation. So I think those are areas that I request my colleagues, especially those in government, and also you, our stakeholders, that we need to open our eyes more on. The urgent need for legislative reforms to ensure to enhance social protection. I want to say I can only note that colleagues in the Ministry of Gender know that we are working with them on intensifying picking data and information on how that policy has performed, and we're also soon coming up with a report towards the same. I want to agree with all these findings that I've so far seen here, because we have also seen them. And finally, the idea of social protection will need to be reconceptualized and subjected to a comprehensive regulatory analysis. This is the only way we are going to deal with the fragmented public policy landscape. We have all acknowledged in this finding, it was acknowledged before, that one of the biggest challenges with social protection policy formulation and implementation is the fact that we have too many players doing, in some cases, the same things, such that getting a holistic, credible picture of what is happening is difficult. So I think
Yes, thank you. And again, I like that you've also reaffirmed what was in the discussions that were prevailing largely. Thank you for adding your voice to that and pointing out the imperative of inclusivity, but also constant review of policies and laws that we have. Did you have something to say? Okay, the microphone can go to the back. I don't know if this is still working.
Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Sarah Nanyondokelo and I work with Akina Mama wa Africa. Thanks, Isa, for such an insightful report. And I think we've been challenged to do much more of this so that we bring the facts and figures to the light. My call is to the policymakers in this room to always look at policy formulation as an interconnected endeavor. Right now, in Uganda, we have policies that are independent, that do not look at the intersectionality or the different issues that come together to lead us to the problem that we are trying to address today. When our judges were talking, they talked about taking care of their grandchildren. That is a ripple effect of a failed system. So if we do not address those failed systems and then wait to address the fruits of them, then we are going to go into the silos of creating so many social protection funds. If we do not address the issue of unemployment in the country, if we do not address the issue of tax regimes that are not working for us, we have talked about a national health insurance bill for years and it hasn't been passed. But if we had the national health insurance bill passed and they are able to access health free and of quality, then healthcare would not be a problem that the SAGE program would be considering. So in our policy formulation as legislators, let us always pay that keen eye of looking at the interconnectedness of these issues so that we don't address them as single issues, but rather address the root causes of them for us to be able to have a comprehensive package that we give to the people of Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I like that you bring out the issue of the interconnectedness. And as you're mentioning, things such as the National Health Insurance Scheme, you know, the bill, something that also ISA worked on for long. And likes of Zephania know that ISA was at their doors endlessly. And other programs such as also the review of the minimum wage bill, that is also yet another discussion. So when you talk about how interconnected the issue of social protection is, I really agree with you. So we need to have a multi-pronged approach if we're going to have meaningful results. There is someone else who had his hand or her hand up. Do you have someone else? This side. Oh, all right. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC, the panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. Once again, my name is Robert Nkwangu, and I'm the Executive Director of the Uganda National Association of the Deaf, and I use sign language. I want to appreciate the initiative of social protection, and I want to come in with the angle of persons with the disabilities, because we really see that most of these monies are unclaimed, and cash transfers may not only be the solution, but once we address the issue of attitude, you could see the pictures out there from the exhibition. Those that got some relief had some help from their children. So if the attitude of that is replicated, especially persons with the disabilities, those can also do apply and then get these monies. The negative attitude within our parishes, take an example, the officers of PDM, many have been saying that persons with disabilities are not there in the parishes. And so these monies are shifted and given to the youths because the youths are very, very many. But you forget the issue that government is not good at mobilizing people. We as the CSOs, we reach out to very many people. Personally here, I can reach out to people in Kalaki, in Kabong, in wherever, because I have them on me. So most of this work, if you leave out the work of the CSOs, that will be a gap. And I think it is high time persons with the disabilities are given attention beyond the cash. Once we address a lot of factors, be it attitude or that, and the stigmatization also that is given towards people like us. You could hardly, people like me are hardly reached out because of the stigma. My recommendation is, that we need a comprehensive approach towards persons with disabilities beyond cashing out this money, because we shall mitigate very many challenges if we address that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for that addition from UNAD and for highlighting that as well. There's another question. Yes, over here.
Thank you very much, Isa and facilitator. My name is Beatrice Okilan. I work with the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. I work as a social protection policy and advocacy coordinator. I want to add my voice to the other speakers to thank Isa for the research that has been done and what is coming out. I think this is a sign that there is good progress that is going on. I think my colleague already mentioned, even one of the panelists, about the social protection policy and the fact that the National Social Protection Policy recognizes that the risks and vulnerabilities that Ugandans face are diverse, and an individual might face several risks at a certain point, and maybe not just cash transfers will be able to meet that need, and then also they change over time. And so the policy actually proposes comprehensive interventions, social protection interventions, and they are all there in the policy. But of course, bearing in mind that for social protection to be sustained, it has to be led and implemented by government. And government also has those limitations of resources. So the policy says that, the interventions will be developed as and when government is able to, both administrative as well as the financial abilities. And so whatever we have said here, it's considered in the policy as well as in the revised the social protection strategy, which the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development is concluding. It's all recognized. There was, I think, a question or something. Somebody talked about social security for those who are not maybe in the informal, for those who don't belong to the categories of old age, but in the informal sector. And just to say that the NSSF amendment of 2022 opened up, provided for a voluntary contribution scheme. And I think that what is important is for us to create that awareness, because if the persons who are working in the informal sector can contribute to that, it will help them to access social security. Government is aware that government will not be able to expand the grants so much, and so there is need also to promote that voluntary contribution. So it is us, I think the media is here to support that dissemination so that people are aware. I think there were so many issues talked about here about the pay points, about the older persons. We really recognize that and we appreciate, but I think the ministry again is working on that. The pay points at the moment are actually supposed to be at the parish level, When we talk of going to individual households, it's a little bit challenging and costly. Remember that the payments are done by the bank, but we think that at the parish level, it should be quite accessible. And since the beneficiaries receive money for 3 months, once it's paid once every 3 months, so it's not that they're taking all the 20 to pick only 25,000. So that is some of the mediations that have been put in place. But I think what is key is also information for us, because the system picks out all those beneficiaries that reach out, that reach the eligibility age of 88 years. And if the older person has the ID and it has the right information, that person will be picked. I have my personal example, people around about my community, two of them. One is a pensioner, the other one is not a pensioner. They made 80 years. The pensioner made 80 years and the system picked the name and sent to the point where the person was registered. So when that information went there, the CDOs were calling out this pensioner, come and register, come and enroll, because your name has come. But of course, the pensioner had information that if you go there, actually they fear even appearing there, that if you go there, you will be deleted from the from the pension of the payroll, from the payroll of the pension scheme, government pension. So he didn't go there. In fact, they kept calling him for like for 4 years. They were calling him, your name, you have become eligible, but said you can't reach there because for him he's already a pensioner. But there was this person also who made 80 years, was registered in another district in Kampala here. But the person went back to the village. So when the person made 80 years, the system here picked the name and sent to the location here where the person was registered. Of course, the CDOs could not find that person, could not trace the person, until we had actually, when we checked it, we had to check and say, where is this person? The system had it, the person had become eligible in 2020, but he was not enrolled because she had registered here and then she had not looked, she had gone back to the village. But that person, as soon as that was done, it was put in. So I think it is really that information, national awareness, wherever we have registered, when somebody gets to 80, if somebody has the correct credentials in the national ID, we should be able to access the payroll. So it's all our responsibility to sensitize the people around about us when they get to 80, to really check if you're not able to find from the resources, the district is able also to provide that information. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Beatrice, and also for highlighting that and acknowledging that all this, because at a certain point it seems like these are conversations that are heavily only led by civil society, but to know that you also are alive to them is very important for a duty bearer to know that. There's something that you'd also hinted on with regards to older persons and accessing pay points. There is an initiative of ensuring that if one cannot make it to the pay point, then they can have an alternative recipient. It's a very brilliant one, but also certain times we found that the process of registering the alternatives then has also lagged a bit. So it's something that I wanted to point out and say that process can also really be moved faster to ensure that those that cannot make their way to the pay points then have an alternative. Otherwise, I think we have exhausted our time here and we're right on time, if anything. So about this time, I do not have there's another hand still. Oh, Doctor. Doctor has a word to say. Yes, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had to rush for another engagement. I came back just as we were concluding. I just wanted to put across something that I've observed over time. And I think when you go through the report, you realize that there are so many aspects of social protection that tend to be ignored. And I think if we're a bit critical, you may also find that this is something that is very true when you look at the way we're making contributions. There are some aspects of social protection we need to open up because when we have programs like SAGE and programs for the elderly and so on and so forth, we shouldn't forget that there are some areas that are really not tackled at all. So these are areas where we need to open up and also see, especially our colleagues from the ministry, we know very well how much you're trying. But as we discuss, I'm just leaving this open. Let us open.
Citzens bamaama abakadde baffe tubaagala nnyo mwebale kujja okubeera wano naffe. Honorable members of parliament, the representatives of IMF, Isa, we can't appreciate you more. Partners, I've seen, all the partners here. EOC, Ministry of Health, all MDAs are here. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a journey which we must not let the momentum go below. And the future is very bright going forward. Issues to do with the taxation now are supposed to be our issues of concern, because taxation enhances inequity. In a way, it also creates vulnerability, because remember, when they press so much, it is the small and medium micro enterprises that suffer, that employ people. That's where the people of the shops, people who support the older persons, people who take care of children are. Instead of leveraging taxes for the cream de la cream, then the taxes end up oppressing the lower quantile of our population. I think tax equity is very, very, very important. It's an area we need to put our attention in social protection and issues to do with corporate social responsibility. See whether actually it helps to alleviate some of the challenges or the problems that they set out to achieve. So we appreciate you. It's very risky talk between lunch, especially after so many speeches and especially when Mr. Kamia is busy monitoring me on his computer there. I feel very, very warned that I should make very brief of my speech. Thank you so much. We look forward to engaging you. Personally, I don't know what I should even inform you about, because we have a lot that is going on. We need to be caught quickly, because there's a lot that is going on. We are rolling out the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. It's a lot that is coming, and resources should go towards gearing up support. And probably, again, my last call is to come up with a robust legislation to address some of these challenges. We need to codify all these practices that we have built. I want to wish you the best, and thank you, and look forward to engaging you. Thank you so much, Isa. Thank you so much, partners. God bless you. Thank you.
Hope everyone has